Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of the Ortega family. Paula, born in March 1986, is the second child in a large family. She excelled at Dario Figueroa Lara School and then went on to study at the Polytechnic University. During her time at university, Paula discovered her passion for the hospitality industry. After completing her studies, Paula became actively involved in expanding her family's business, focusing on the production of party goods. Her family, the Ortega Alcocers, were wealthy and highly respected in Sangalqui and surrounding towns in Ecuador. Paula's father had started his business by supplying party goods across Ecuador, eventually finding great success and enabling him to produce his own balloons, piñatas, and other festive items. This growth led to the establishment of multiple stores. The business success led to the opening of several stores in various locations, including in Sinoli in Ecuador's capital, Quito. Each member of the family played a vital role in the business, contributing to its development and operation. The father oversaw the expansion of the main production line, while opening new workshops for various party items. Paula and her two siblings each managed a store, shaping it according to their own vision. Paula's entrepreneurial skills extended beyond just managing her store. The business became even more successful when she added a party planning service. This venture brought her immense joy as it allowed her to bring happiness to people. Paula Ortega has achieved great success in her business career, but her personal life has not been as fortunate. Despite her youthful appearance, she faced numerous hardships in her life, with her first marriage to Carlos Pedro serving as an example. After their first daughter was born, Carlos became an alcoholic. This led to him frequently disappearing from home, during which time he also stole money from Paula's shop. Things got worse when Paula discovered Carlos was having an affair, forcing her to end her marriage to him. During this difficult time, raising her daughter alone, Paula found it difficult to be optimistic to find happiness. However, with her family's emotional support and dedication to work, she eventually regained some stability. It wasn't until 10 years later that Paula met Christian Diego, a young man 4 years her junior. She was initially hesitant to trust him due to what had happened before. Christian, however, turned out to be patient, reliable, and especially skilled in forming a connection with Paula's daughter. 2 years into the relationship, Paula's heart softened towards Christian, and they decided to get married. Christian lovingly Paula's daughter as his own, and soon they welcomed their new daughter, Maria. Christian and Paula spent 5 happy years together, during which time Christian became an integral part of Paula's family business, helping to find locations for new stores. This job required him to travel often, resulting in frequent absences from home. Christian comes from a low-income family, but he has big dreams. He wants to one day own a large and successful business. In 2000, when her father passed away after a long illness, her life took a complete turn. The loss devastated the family and disrupted their business. Some people are so skilled at hiding their true nature that they can live with others for years without raising suspicion. A shocking and unexpected incident is often what exposes their true nature. And Christian's change becomes apparent after several incidents, which reveal his true character. Christian and his wife, Paula Ortega, appeared to be a happy and successful couple to those around them. But beneath the surface, their relationship was far from perfect. Christian saw an opportunity to take over Paula's father's role and fulfill his own ambitions of wealth and power. Unfortunately, due to his lack of experience, he made a series of failed business decisions. Frustrated and desperate, Christian's behavior towards his family changed dramatically. He began to resent them, then abandoned them to live a life of luxury. He immersed himself in a world of pleasure and became involved with many women and alcohol. Without Paula's father to restrain him, Christian's true nature finally began to emerge. Paula refuses to repeat the mistakes of her previous miserable marriage, but her relationship with Christian only gets worse. They had an unhappy home life, filled with frequent, that revealed Christian's true character, an ambitious and power-hungry individual who only cared about himself and demanded unconditional obedience. After a heated argument, Paula secretly filed for divorce. However, when Christian found out, his behavior suddenly changed. To maintain his status in the family and afraid of losing everything, Christian repented and tried to change everything. He sincerely apologized for his previous actions, saying that they were due to confusion and insecurity, and vowed to love and cherish his family. Convinced by Christian's words and afraid of being alone again, Paula decided to give him a second chance, despite her initial reservations. In an attempt to mend their relationship, Christian proposed a romantic dinner at home, which Paula agreed to. To prepare for the evening, Paula asked her parents to babysit her daughter. While getting ready, she still couldn't get rid of her mixed feelings. On the surface, she was very excited, but deep inside, she still longed for a happy, united family and durable family. The evening got off to a great start, with the living room decorated with festive garlands and the dining table lit by the warm glow of candles. Christian opened a bottle of white wine, and Paula served a hot meal. However, Christian's sudden announcement disrupted the peaceful atmosphere. He shared with Paula his plans for the Allure company, revealing that he had made a serious mistake in a recent tender, and it has resulted in significant financial losses. Christian announces that the company needs a new investor to stay afloat. This means that a portion of the company's ownership will change officially. Paula objects to the idea, believing that her father's business should remain family-owned. Christian, who has found an investor, becomes increasingly frustrated with Paula's objections. His eagerness to close the deal clashes with Paula's desire to keep the company in the family, causing tension in their relationship and spoiling the mood at dinner. On January 2, 2023, Paula took her youngest daughter to the playroom. She then went to her shop, where she was preparing a large order for an upcoming themed event, which involved assembling balloon fountains and party decorations. During her lunch break, two men showed up at the shop, despite it being closed. She opened the door, expecting a courier for the balloon bouquets she had prepared. To her surprise, the two men were dressed alike and wore dark hoodies, which made them stand out from the other customer. As they entered the shop, they seemed out of place and they're lingering. Scanning the area caused Paula to feel uneasy. The situation escalated when they moved toward her, cornering her against the wall. Then, a young courier knocked on the glass door, breaking the tense atmosphere. Two suspicious men quickly left the store, and the delivery person accidentally rescued Paula from a dangerous situation. Paula felt a mix of anxiety and apprehension as she handed over the package, then she proceeded to close her shop, wrapping up her day. Her hands trembled as she called her mother, expressing her fear over the phone. Although her mother advised reporting the incident to the police, Paula declined. Maybe she was just scared, and no harm actually happened. The rest of the day, Paula's thoughts were consumed by the strange encounter and her husband Christian's recent behavior. Seeking comfort, she took a walk around the city, stopping at a cafe for coffee and then visiting her sister, where they shared a cup of fragrant tea. As they talked, Paula opened up to her sister about the frightening encounter at her shop and her troubled marriage. She shared how Christian had changed after their father's passing, becoming increasingly consumed by his addiction to alcohol and being unfaithful. For the first time, Paula let go of her pride and shame, confessing to her sister the pain she endured in her marriage. The conversation brought her a sense of relief and comfort. Paula's younger sister Adriana described her as lively, happy, enterprising, and hardworking, with a gentle and kind nature as a mother. One day, Paula discussed her long-term goals with her sister, including her aspirations for her daughter's future careers and her own plans for the business. She was a selfless and dedicated person. After their emotional conversation, Paula headed home. However, her journey was interrupted by a phone call from Christian. He informed her that he was picking up their daughter from her play activities and would also stop by the shop to pick up his other daughter. The background noise of children's voices made his conversation rushed. Paula didn't get an opportunity to tell Christian about a disturbing incident at her shop, largely because she suspected his possible involvement. Paula reluctantly went back to work, putting her family's needs before her own. Christian soon arrived alone, explaining that their daughter had opted to go home early and he couldn't refuse her request. He told Paula that the girls were waiting for dinner at home and were looking forward to hamburgers. Then, Christian took Paula to the courtyard of a shopping center several blocks away, rather than a nearby fast food joint. After parking the car in a secluded area, he left Paula inside while he went to collect their order. As she relaxed in the passenger seat after a stressful day, Paula closed her eyes, unaware of the danger approaching. Two familiar figures soon appeared near the car, talking loudly and circling the vehicle. Paula recognized them as the unexpected visitors who had been to her shop. She tried to remain calm, trusting that the car was secure and Christian would return soon. However, the car's lights suddenly flashed, and the door locks disengaged. Panicked, Paula scrambled to the back seat, hiding between the seats and covering her head with her arms. Unfortunately, she was trapped with no escape. One of the intruders took the driver's seat, and the other got into the back seat. There, he pinned Paula down, making her situation worse. She then felt a warm liquid flowing down her arm, and shortly after, she lost consciousness. Paula sustained severe injuries, including 11 knife wounds on her neck and 2 on her face. A violent attack left Paula heavily injured and her assailants fled the scene. 7 minutes later, Christian returned to the car and witnessed a horrifying scene. The inside of the car was covered in blood. Panicked, Christian called emergency services and struggled to explain the situation clearly. After notifying Paula's mother about the attack, Christian drove to the hospital, but sadly, Paula died in the emergency room before receiving medical attention. Christian's reaction to his wife's tragic death was one of intense grief. Paula's sudden and violent death left everyone in shock, and many questions remained unanswered about the identity and motives of her attackers. Investigators discovered that $600 and a gold necklace were missing from Paula's purse, so they initially suspected a robbery. Further investigation revealed that 2 unknown men had visited Paula's store earlier that day, captured on city cameras. Although the footage showed the suspects wearing hoodies, making their faces unidentifiable, but images from the security camera footage still provide some clues for investigators to pursue. 2 months after the tragic incident, Paula's family was still seeking justice, but the investigation had made little progress. However, things changed when Paula's younger sister, Adriana, shared important information that she suspected Christian was involved in the case. Adriana told investigators about her conversation with Paula on the day of the incident. Revealing Christian's infidelity and domestic violence towards Paula, which led Paula to consider ending her marriage. Christian had a motive for the crime, because if the divorce happened, his ambitions would be affected and he would lose his wealth and social status. The prosecution learned about this lead further and conducted a search of Christian's home, where they found incriminating messages on his phone. These messages revealed multiple affairs and strained marital relations. Another critical piece of evidence was a document that Paula had refused to sign, which would have transferred the company to other investors. As the prosecution continues to gather evidence against Christian, they uncover new details that shed further light on the complexities of Christian and Paula's relationship. Notably, 2 weeks after the incident, Adriana discovered a transaction that raised further suspicions about Christian's behavior. She discovered that he had made a significant transaction, transferring $2,000 to an unidentified woman's bank account. He made a payment from his wife Paula's account while she was dying from her injuries. It seems Christian has been waiting for the right opportunity to do this. Investigations confirmed that on the day of the incident, Christian made a $2,000 transfer to Laura Castillo's bank account. Laura, a 28-year-old woman, was questioned by police after her identity was discovered as the recipient of the payment. Laura explained that she had noticed her bank card was missing a couple of days before the transfer but hadn't thought much of it, assuming her brother had borrowed it. Although her account received the payment, Laura denied knowing Christian and had a solid alibi for the time of the incident, which cleared her of any involvement. She was released from questioning, but the investigation was left at a dead end once again. Days after the crime, Laura went back to the police station with an update on her brother. As she initially suspected, he had indeed returned her bank card. Laura gave a detailed description of her brother's appearance, which matched one of the criminals caught on surveillance cameras near the car. One crucial piece of evidence was that one attacker had neglected to pull up his hood while fleeing the scene, allowing his face to be seen. The investigation led to the identification of two offenders, Byron and Morton Castillo, who had an extensive history of criminal activity. The two criminals were arrested, but the question remains, why did these criminals target Paula? A deeper investigation revealed that they had attacked Paula repeatedly. On December 8, 2022, Paula was the victim of a car theft at a gas station. As she was distracted by one man, his accomplice quickly got into her car and drove away. Thankfully, her daughters were not in the vehicle at the time. The gas station's surveillance footage revealed the identities of the perpetrators. Besides, Paula had unknowingly met one of the thieves earlier that day. In a surprising turn of events, Christian then came forward claiming that the thieves had contacted him. He arranged a meeting with them, and during this encounter, he managed to retrieve Paula's stolen belongings, including her wallet. This action of Christian makes people suspicious of his true intentions and wonder if he is collaborating with the thieves. Surveillance cameras became key in identifying the men involved in the carjacking, and Christian realized he was a suspect. To divert the police's suspicion, Christian created a new defense story, claiming that he had been blackmailed by Byron and Morton. They demanded a large sum of money from him. However, before he could make this statement, the police acted quickly by questioning Byron and Morton separately and only telling one of them that the other suspect had confessed. The police obtained a confession from Morton. According to Morton's statement, Christian had paid them $2,000 over 2 months before to kill his wife, Paula, with the promise of an additional $2,000 after the murder. During a reenactment of the crime, Morton showed how he inflicted 11 fatal knife wounds on the Paula. With the crime exposed, Morton callously revealed all the details about his and Christian's arrangement. Morton exposed that the car theft and the attack on Paula's shop were also tactics used by Christian to intimidate her. Fortunately, Paula survived for a few hours longer than planned. On November 29, 2023, the three suspects, Christian, Byron, and Morton, appeared in court. The prosecution presented a detailed account of the incidents on the day of the murder, compiled from multiple sources. Surveillance camera footage from the area where Christian parked his car was analyzed using forensic techniques. The footage revealed a disturbing series of incidents. In the video, Christian is seen leaving his car and walking towards an elevator in a nearby shopping center. Soon after, Christian is seen remotely unlocking his car from a distance, allowing two accomplices, Byron and Morton, to enter the vehicle and attack Paula. The prosecutor's report highlighted Christian's unusual behavior after the attack. Surveillance videos showed him pacing back and forth, making phone calls, and even approaching and then retreating from the car. When he found his bleeding wife, he displayed no signs of shock or a sense of urgency to get her medical help. According to the videos, during the first 4 minutes after the attack, Christian's actions were calm and deliberate. He callously handled financial transactions, paying Byron and Morton for their role in the assault, while Paula lay bleeding in the car. At the time, she was still alive. Paula's family lawyers used this footage as evidence, urging the court to consider it as an aggravating factor in the crime. Christian dropped off Byron and Morton near Paula's store before the attack. However, these individuals arrived at the store earlier than expected, suggests that the original murder may have been planned for the store's closing time, when Paula was alone and eating lunch. The sequence of incident presented in court during Christian's trial indicates that the crime was premeditated. Several hours before the 1:30 p.m. attack, prosecutor Marlon Caldern pointed out inconsistencies in the suspects' actions, highlighting the question of how they knew Paula would be at the store at that time, unless they had been following them. Furthermore, Christian's behavior was scrutinized as evidence of his involvement in the crime. Notably, he was observed not fully closing the car window and unlocking the doors near the store. Additionally, he was seen pacing back and forth multiple times before assisting his wife and making phone calls, rather than immediately seeking medical attention at a nearby clinic. These actions are central to the case against him, which accuses him of orchestrating the murder of his wife, Paula. Testimonies from 10 witnesses, including neighbors, friends, and acquaintances, revealed Christian's true motives and objectives. He tried to pressure Paula into transferring her shares in the company because he could not sign a legal contract, but his efforts were unsuccessful. Although Christian did not physically harm Paula, he inflicted severe psychological abuse on her, artfully concealing it under the guise of a perfect family life. The Prosecutor General's report stated that video evidence implicated Christian as the mastermind behind the crimes, leading to his isolation. This measure is not an arrest warrant but a precautionary step to curb his threat to society. After this incident, Christian was accused of orchestrating his wife's death. His defense team tried their best to defend that he was innocent. However, they were unsuccessful in refuting key evidence, including surveillance footage and falsified company transfer documents. The defense team then changed their strategy, attempting to depict Christian as suffering from a mental disorder. Multiple psychiatrists evaluated Christian, but ultimately, he was deemed competent to stand trial. With the gravity of the situation becoming increasingly clear, Christian's defense counsel advised him to flee the country. They asked if his passport was ready and suggested that he purchase a ticket to Panama for the next day. However, this plan to evade justice ultimately failed. Christian's search for Central American flight tickets initially raised suspicion with the authorities. Following this discovery, the prosecutor quickly ordered an 8-hour detention of Christian. This was succeeded by the presentation of charges and the disclosure of case details to a specialized domestic violence judge, preceding the trial. Christian was held in pre-trial detention as the alleged mastermind behind an extreme act of violence that left 2 young children without a mother and their family to grieve. The Paula Ortega family demands justice for this heinous crime, emphasizing the immense pain and suffering inflicted on their children and the devastating loss they endured. After the case was widely publicized, the jury delivered a guilty verdict, finding Christian and his 2 accomplices, Byron and Morton, committed a brutal, intentional and carefully planned crime. As the trio showed no remorse, Christian and Byron and Morton were ultimately sentenced to 26 years in prison. The municipal authorities of Romanawi are deeply saddened by the loss of Paula. They expressed their heartfelt condolences to her family and friends. Paula was a highly respected businesswoman, a loving friend, mother, and wife who played a vital role in the development of the canton and bringing prosperity to those around her. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Nancy Paula Reyes. Nancy Paula Reyes Gorsi was born on April 13, 1991, in Granados, Guatemala, to Jorge and Pren Gorsi, a poor family of 7. Despite their financial struggles, her parents were determined to provide their 5 children with a good education, hoping they would have better lives. Nancy excelled in school, which enabled her to enroll in the University of Villanova, where she earned a degree in business administration and document management with honors. However, her academic achievements did not immediately translate to career success. She worked part-time as a cashier and later became an administrator at a supermarket, but her professional growth stagnated. During her university years, Nancy was in an unregistered marriage with a man whose identity remains private, and they had 2 daughters together. Unfortunately, the relationship ended and the couple separated. The father of the children lost interest in their well-being and failed to provide financial support. Nancy lived with her parents and daughters, working at a supermarket with no clear future prospects. The family struggled financially, barely covering essential expenses. However, Nancy's older sister's decision to immigrate to the U.S. in 2013 changed everything. Her sister found a good job, got married, and settled down, inspiring Nancy to make a similar change. Instead of the U.S., Nancy chose to relocate to sunny Spain. The problem was that Nancy didn't have enough money to buy a one-way plane ticket, let alone cover initial expenses. So she worked hard for several years, saving diligently until she finally had enough money to make her dream a reality. In July 2018, Nancy bought a ticket to Madrid, promising her parents she would stay in touch to alleviate their worries. Her plan was to find a place to live and a job upon arrival, with a few €1,000 to cover rent, food, and essentials until she could secure a steady income. When Nancy left, she was 27 years old, and her daughters, who stayed with their grandparents in Guatemala, were 7 and 5 years old. After a brief stay in Madrid, Nancy moved to Barcelona and later settled in Cádiz, the capital of the province of Cádiz, Spain. She kept in close touch with her family, calling home almost every day to check in on them and regularly sending money to support them. Over time, her remittances enabled her parents not only to support themselves and her daughters, but also to renovate their old house. Although Nancy didn't have a steady job, she made a living by doing odd jobs like cleaning houses for wealthy families and caring for the elderly and sick. Despite the challenges, Nancy never complained and was optimistic about her decision to move to Europe, where she believed she had more opportunities. She was convinced that she could never have earned as much back in Guatemala, even if she worked non-stop without days off. Nancy was pleased with her new life and even planned to bring her daughters to Spain once she had saved enough to rent a comfortable and spacious home for the whole family. Nancy initially kept her personal life private, citing her busy work schedule as the reason. However, in the spring of 2020, she confided in her parents about meeting Carlos Andres Bustamante, with whom she had begun a romantic relationship. The two had met by chance while Nancy was searching for a new place to live, and as they spent more time together, their relationship blossomed. They eventually moved in together, with Carlos being a year older than Nancy. At the start of their relationship, Carlos didn't have a steady income, relying on small, odd jobs to get by. As a result, Nancy became the primary breadwinner, covering their housing and bills, and often providing financial support for Carlos's personal expenses. Despite this, Nancy never expressed any concerns to her family, leading them to believe that she had found a loving and supportive partner. Nancy's 2 younger brothers had also relocated to Spain, and she remained in close contact with them, especially Dennis, the youngest, who had met Carlos and found him likable. In June 2020, Nancy and Carlos decided to move to Santander, a resort city on the Atlantic coast. When Nancy spoke with her family, she mentioned that the climate was warmer and there were more job opportunities. However, this was when problems in her relationship with Carlos started to emerge, which she tried to keep hidden. Carlos turned out to be jealous, hot-tempered, and even cruel. He had no career ambitions and was content to be supported by Nancy. Moreover, he struggled with alcohol abuse and occasionally used prohibited substances, despite repeatedly promising to quit and find a stable job. When Nancy discovered she was pregnant, she was already questioning whether to continue her life with Carlos. Carlos was overjoyed by the news and promised that their life would improve, but in reality, things only worsened. He continued to drink and use drugs, taking money from Nancy or asking his mother for it. Worse still, he began physically abusing Nancy, which she tried to conceal from everyone. On the evening of August 12th, a disturbing scene unfolded while Nancy was video chatting with her parents. Her partner, Carlos, suddenly burst into a fit of rage, yelling at Nancy and demanding to know who she was talking to. Refusing to believe her when she told him it was her mother, he snatched the phone from her hands. After verifying the truth by glancing at the screen, he carelessly tossed the device onto a chair and walked away. The very next day, a similar incident occurred. Carlos again wrestled the phone from Nancy's hands while she was speaking with her parents and daughters. He insisted on knowing who she was talking to, hurled insults at her, and even made threats. A terrified Nancy later attempted to downplay the situation to her relatives, attributing Carlos's behavior to excessive jealousy and assuring them that everything was under control. However, her concerned parents urged her to report the incidents to the police, but Nancy insisted on handling the matter herself. On August 17th, Nancy had a concerning phone conversation with her sister. She stated that if anything happened to her, Carlos would be responsible. Although her words were ominous, she didn't explain further, only asking her sister to take care of her children if needed. This was the last time her sister heard from Nancy. Nancy vanished on August 20th around 2 p.m. She sent a text to her father, promising to call later that evening, but she never did. Her family tried contacting Carlos, but he didn't respond either. The situation was alarming because the couple had recently moved to Santander, had no friends there, and Nancy's brothers were on the other side of the country. A few days later, a suspicious message came from Carlos's phone, claiming that he and Nancy had argued and decided to separate. The message stated that Nancy had left to find a new apartment, ignoring his calls, and he had no idea where she was. Nancy's brothers suggested that Carlos come to Ciudad Real to file a missing person report with them. Carlos agreed, but he never showed up, didn't file the report, and ceased communicating with the family. Nancy's relatives reached out to the police to file a report about her disappearance. In the meantime, Nancy's friends provided her brothers with the address of Sandra Bustamante, Carlos's mother. When they visited her, she became emotional and confessed that she had suspected her son might do something harmful to his partner, but she didn't provide any specific details. Sandra also claimed to have no knowledge about the whereabouts of her son and his fiancée. Although Carlos wasn't answering her calls, he sent her brief messages asking her to stop inquiring and to give him some time. Despite liking Nancy, Sandra was aware of her son's capabilities and understood his true nature. Sandra went to the police station the next day for questioning about Nancy's disappearance. She told the officers what she had already shared with Nancy's brothers, Carlos's troubling behavior and a lengthy text message from Nancy. In the message, Nancy warned Sandra not to give Carlos any money because he would waste it on alcohol and drugs, which made him aggressive and cruel. Nancy said Carlos had no intention of finding a job or overcoming his addictions, and his behavior had become increasingly threatening, making her consider leaving him. She believed it was better to end their relationship before someone got hurt. The investigation also uncovered some disturbing information about Carlos. He had been convicted of bodily harm multiple times, including brutally beating his own mother when he was 17. Although he only received probation at the time, he later served short sentences for assaulting women he lived with and had relationships with. The investigation into Carlos and Nancy's relationship revealed many red flags from the start. Carlos had a history of aggression, drug addiction, and a criminal record, which was compounded by his uncontrollable rage. Meanwhile, Nancy's friends disclosed that she was not just a housekeeper or caregiver, as she had claimed. Instead, she was providing escort services to wealthy clients in Santander, earning a substantial income. Carlos was aware of her occupation and initially accepted it, as it allowed him to avoid finding work himself. However, when Nancy became pregnant, Carlos's behavior became increasingly erratic. He grew suspicious about the child's paternity, wondering if it belonged to one of her clients. Additionally, he was consumed by jealousy, vacillating between preventing her from interacting with other men and forcing her to continue working to support them financially. Meanwhile, Carlos squandered the money he took from his mother on his own vices, leaving them struggling to make ends meet. After nearly a week of unexplained absence, Nancy and Carlos's whereabouts were unknown. Although Carlos had been in touch through messages, he never revealed his location. It wasn't until August 26th that police finally obtained a search warrant for the couple's vacant rental apartment in Santander. The discovery they made was gruesome and left no doubt that Nancy had met a tragic end. Bloodstains were found throughout the apartment, with some attempts made to clean them up, but most were still visible to the naked eye, including in the clogged bathroom and toilet drains. The police also found fragments of bones, hair, skin, and internal organs. Forensic analysis confirmed that these belonged to Nancy, even though her body was not found in the apartment. The crime scene suggested that Nancy had been brutally killed, dismembered in the bathroom, and her remains disposed of elsewhere. Carlos was quickly identified as the main suspect in the case due to evidence found in the apartment, including a package from a local hardware store with his fingerprints on it. The package was for a small hatchet, but the tool itself was not discovered. Further investigation revealed that Carlos had bought the hatchet, along with rubber gloves and large trash bags, at a nearby market on August 20th. This was confirmed by security footage from the store. An elderly vendor who sold Carlos a small cart also positively identified him from a photo. The day after the gruesome discovery in the apartment, Carlos surprisingly surrendered to a Madrid police station, attempting to shift suspicion away from himself. He claimed to be reporting Nancy missing, but was promptly arrested as the prime suspect in the heinous crime. Carlos professed his innocence, stating that he and Nancy had argued and parted ways on August 20th, after which he left town in an emotional state, unaware of any subsequent events involving Nancy. He suggested that someone might have attacked her when she returned to gather her belongings. However, Carlos's alibi seemed dubious, especially considering the police found his fingerprints on the hatchet's packaging. Despite conducting an extensive search of nearby wastelands, sewer systems, and the coastline with the help of divers, no trace of Nancy was found. To further investigate, the police tracked Carlos's movements from August 20th to 26th, using his mobile phone signals, revealing that he had spent 3 days traveling along the coast and visiting Bilbao and Burgos before heading to Madrid. It was clear that Carlos was trying to conceal his activities, but it seemed unlikely that he would travel across the country with a dismembered body, leading authorities to continue their search in Santander. Street surveillance footage captured Carlos's movements on the evening of August 20th. He was seen walking towards a large forest park, but returned to his apartment late at night. He then left again, this time pushing a cart filled with unusual, oddly shaped bags. Since there were few cameras within the park, Carlos vanished from view once he entered the wooded area. Later, he re-emerged with the same cart, but it was now significantly lighter. He then proceeded towards the railway tracks, which were located near a steep cliff overgrown with bushes. After visiting this area, Carlos returned once more, but this time without the extra weight, providing law enforcement with a clear lead on where to search for the body. On September 16th, police discovered bags containing badly decomposed human remains in a heavily overgrown area on a hillside. The remains were identified as those of Nancy Gorcey, who had been dismembered into 20 parts using a hatchet. Although security camera footage showed everything Carlos had transported in a cart was recovered, one crucial item was still missing: the fetus of the 4-month pregnant Nancy. The state of the victim's genitals and lower abdomen revealed a brutal mutilation with a knife and hatchet, suggesting that the killer had removed the fetus and disposed of it separately from the mother's body. Despite mounting evidence, Carlos refused to admit his involvement, providing contradictory statements and trying to shift the blame onto an unknown attacker. However, traces of Nancy's blood were found on his clothes and shoes, which he had attempted to wash off but failed to completely remove. Through diligent investigation, authorities were able to reconstruct the sequence of tragic events and the entire scenario of the crime, ultimately incriminating Carlos. Forensic experts have reconstructed the events of August 20th. After an argument, the man brutally beat and strangled his pregnant partner, Nancy, in the kitchen, where bloodstains were later found on the floor and walls. Next, he moved Nancy's body to the bathroom, went shopping at a hardware store in the market, and then used a hatchet and large kitchen knife to dismember her body into 20 pieces. He placed the pieces in bags and loaded them into a cart. That night, he took the cart to a park, searching for secluded areas to dispose of the body parts. He followed a pre-planned route, scattering the bags in various locations, hoping they would never be found. The fate of the fetus removed from Nancy's body remains unknown. Carlos denied his guilt, claiming to have loved Nancy from the time of the murder until his arrest in Madrid. He used the money he stole from Nancy to fund his daily bar hopping across various cities. The investigation and search for evidence and witnesses took nearly 2 years, and the trial did not begin. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Smith family. George, from a happy family in Greenwich, Connecticut, grew up with his father's liquor store as a central part of his life. After studying business at Babson College, George worked in Boston as a data mining analyst, but his true passion remained the family business. So, he eventually returned home to learn the ins and outs of the store from his father. In 2002, George met Jennifer, also from Connecticut, at a friend's reunion. Jennifer had just started her teaching career as an elementary school teacher. The couple fell deeply in love, and George's parents were overjoyed with his choice. 3 years later, in 2005, they decided to tie the knot and start a new life together. They got married at Castle Hill Inn in Newport, Rhode Island, with the ocean as a stunning backdrop. The honeymoon cruise that followed was meant to be a relaxing and joyful experience. However, it turned out to be a mysterious and frightening journey that filled them with uncertainty. George and Jennifer met Josh, a 20-year-old from California, and another couple on a cruise ship. Josh quickly became friends with George, and on July 1st, the group decided to spend the day together on land when the ship reached the Italian coast. They had an amazing time exploring the island, trying local food, and creating unforgettable memories. That evening, George and Jennifer met up with their friends again on the ship and decided to have a fun night, enjoying appetizers and drinks before heading to the casino. George and Josh played craps while Jennifer played poker. Although they lost a significant amount of money, they didn't regret it, joking that it was part of their honeymoon. The last time George was seen on video was leaving the casino around 2:30 a.m. Tragedy struck on the morning of July 5, 2005, on the Greek island of Mykonos. George, 26, vanished. The ship's captain searched the cabin where strange footprints were found, as well as the deck, but George was nowhere to be found. The available evidence suggested that something serious had happened, possibly involving violence. The news spread quickly, causing alarm among the passengers. Deck 7 was sealed off, and no one was allowed in or out of their cabins. After discovering blood, it was assumed that George and Jennifer had mysteriously disappeared. The senior officer took charge of the investigation, searching their stateroom for clues. One possibility was that George might have fallen overboard. Meanwhile, the search for the young couple continued. By 10 a.m., Jennifer was found where she was having a pre-booked massage. She seemed surprised and concerned, claiming to be unaware of her husband's whereabouts and that she hadn't seen him since the previous night. She revealed that when she woke up that morning, her husband wasn't there. But she didn't search for him, assuming he was with friends or in another cabin. At noon, Turkish authorities arrived on board to begin an investigation, and the ship's captain reassured the anxious passengers, expressing hope that the situation would be resolved soon. The police investigation into George Smith's disappearance began with his wife Jennifer, who was agitated and seemingly unaware of her husband's whereabouts. She told them that men in white uniforms from the Royal Caribbean had come to her door, saying George might have fallen overboard. Traces of blood were found on the boat's awning, suggesting something terrible had happened. The investigators focused on cabin, which was in disarray, with signs of a possible struggle. They found small drops of blood on the carpet and towel, as well as fingerprints on the balcony railing. Turkish investigators discovered 2 small bloodstains on the bedding, which were identified as George's blood. All evidence pointed to George being harmed inside the cabin before he vanished mysteriously. A chair on the balcony had been moved, suggesting someone had sat there, which raised suspicions that George might have fallen from the balcony. However, the high railing and blood on the awning and inside the cabin also hinted at a possible murder. The investigators started to reconstruct the events of that night, trying to figure out who George was with and what led to the tragedy. They questioned the group of young men who had spent time with the newlyweds the previous night. The men revealed that George and Jennifer had consumed too much alcohol, and they had helped him back to his cabin, where they put him to bed and left him alone. However, there were discrepancies in Josh Askin's testimony. He claimed to have seen Jennifer leave with a casino employee named Lloyd, but video footage showed Jennifer stumbling away at 3:30 a.m., leaving George with her new friends. Lloyd's key card data indicated he returned to his cabin at 3:25 a.m., contradicting Josh's account. The investigation continued, with each new detail adding more mystery to the story. It was discovered that Greg Rosenberg, a 19-year-old with Russian roots, had been part of the group that night. He had met Jennifer in the casino, and they had gambled together until late. The group then headed to the disco, where they continued to drink and dance. As the night wore on, the group members began to disperse to their cabins, but not before they were visibly drunk and rowdy. The events of the night became increasingly unclear, with different witnesses providing conflicting accounts. After the cruise ship staff refused to serve 2 intoxicated visitors, Josh and his friends remembered they had brought a bottle of absinthe from the island of Mykonos. However, crew and passengers were not allowed to consume their own alcohol on board. Josh went to retrieve a special bottle of absinthe from his cabin, which had an unusually high alcohol concentration of over 70%. George hid the bottle in his shorts to avoid detection. Around 3 a.m., when the ship was quiet, a janitor caught the group, including Josh, George, Greg, Zach, and Rostislav, drinking the absinthe. This incident became a key part of the investigation. Jennifer, who had appeared relatively sober, began to stagger and eventually leaned on the casino manager, Lloyd. Her behavior was misinterpreted by some witnesses, who thought she was either trying to keep her balance or flirting. Later, Jennifer got into a conflict with her husband George, which ended with her hitting him. It was unclear whether this was done in a playful or angry manner. Jennifer left the disco around 3:30 a.m., stumbling and visibly intoxicated. The janitor, who had previously noticed the group drinking absinthe, helped her to the elevator and watched her turn right, although her stateroom was on the left. Later, Jennifer was found sleeping in the hallway, far from her room. 2 guards and a female duty officer used a wheelchair to return her to her quarters. When they arrived, the clock showed 4:52 a.m., but George was not present. The curtains on the balcony doors were tightly closed, despite the breeze. This raised questions about George's whereabouts. Deputy Chief of Police Chit Hyman and his wife, who were staying in a neighboring cabin, reported hearing a noise on their floor around 4 a.m. They heard loud noises from the newlyweds' stateroom, followed by brief silence, loud talking, and an argument on the balcony. Chit Hyman called guest services to report the noise and pounded on the wall to try to quiet the disturbance. He then saw 3 unknown men outside the cabin, but did not see George or Jennifer. Several passengers reported hearing a loud noise that sounded like a body hitting the ship's canopy, followed by a woman's scream. However, none of the witnesses had conclusive evidence that a woman was inside the cabin at the time. The investigation raised questions about whether one of the men who entered the cabin might have stayed behind to steal from the newlyweds. The key card records confirm that George and his friends entered his stateroom at 4:05 a.m., according to their testimony, but there is no record of them re-entering the cabin afterwards. This has led to several theories about what might have happened to George Smith. One theory is that George was the victim of a robbery. George and his wife Jennifer had been drinking heavily that night, and by 3:30 a.m., they were no longer able to return to their cabin on their own, suggesting they may have been drugged. Witnesses claimed that George and Jennifer had large sums of money, possibly received as wedding gifts or casino winnings, and that they wore expensive jewelry, including a Breitling watch and an engagement ring. It's possible that their quarters were turned over, and the traces of blood on the sheet could have come from an attempt to remove George's watch. Another theory is that George's death was related to the effects of alcohol and hallucinogens. The captain suggested that George might have had an accidental fall while drunk, and experts noted that absinthe could cause hallucinations in high concentrations. However, the absinthe George and Jennifer purchased was bought officially in Europe, and experts believe it was unlikely to cause hallucinations. The FBI investigation into George's disappearance involved interviewing several key individuals, including Jennifer and casino manager Lloyd Botha, who both passed polygraph tests. Josh Askin failed his polygraph test, which may indicate that he was hiding something, but it could also be due to the interrogation tactics used. A videotape showing 3 men, including Russians, joking about George's disappearance was found, with one of them saying, "We gave him a lesson in paragliding without a parachute," which could be a hint about what happened to George. In 2009, 4 men, including Greg, Zach, Rostislav, and Josh Askin, were interviewed by the FBI as witnesses. Zach Rosenberg and Josh Askin refused to give direct answers, citing the Fifth Amendment, and their testimony remained ambiguous. The George Smith investigation was influenced by Greg Rosenberg's testimony, who claimed that he and others ordered food to their cabin that night, which would have provided an alibi for the Russian men. However, there are contradictions to this claim, as ship records do not support the order, and the cabin's delivery service was blocked the day before. Furthermore, the staff was instructed not to provide service to them that night. Greg Rosenberg's account of the relationship between George and Jennifer was also unclear, as he claimed it was difficult to determine due to heavy alcohol consumption. He emphasized that everyone in the group was highly intoxicated, making it impossible to draw conclusions about their relationship. However, there are contradictions in Greg's testimony, as Josh Askin stated that Greg left the cabin after ordering food, which Greg denied. These contradictions added complexity to the investigation, requiring further verification and fact-finding. Greg claimed that he had no information about Jennifer or Lloyd Botha's involvement in George's disappearance, but believed that the event was not accidental. He hinted that something significant happened that night that would eventually be revealed. Sadly, Greg Rosenberg was murdered in 2019, and his death remains unsolved, with police investigating a possible link between his murder and George's death. The Smith family persisted in demanding the truth and justice, but their efforts yielded little results. They offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to those responsible and called for a boycott of the ship owner's company, which they believed was covering up the incident. The family's relationship with Jennifer became strained as her behavior seemed suspicious, and her reluctance to share information raised concerns. She claimed to be following FBI instructions, but her decision to accept a $1 million settlement from the cruise company led the Smith family to lose faith in her and suspect that she was hiding something. The Smith family was disappointed with the Turkish authorities' investigation and felt that Jennifer was too quick to accept the offer. They believed that she was not showing the proper interest in finding out what happened to George. Jennifer claimed to remember little from that night after 2:30 a.m. and was not aware that the liner staff had found her in the corridor and returned her to her cabin. The Turkish investigation did not satisfy the Smith family, leading them to seek the help of independent forensic scientist Henry Lee, who conducted further studies in the cabin and on the balcony that were not included in the official investigation. The investigation into George Smith's disappearance aimed to determine whether his death was a murder or an accident. Henry Lee, an expert, suggested that the balcony's height made it uncertain whether George died from a fall, and alternative scenarios, such as being pushed by someone or being in a state of insanity, could not be ruled out. Lee planned to simulate a fall from the balcony using a dummy to gather more evidence, but the cruise liner's owner refused to allow it. This decision raised suspicions among George's relatives, who believed it was an attempt to conceal the truth. The FBI conducted their own investigation, focusing on the 4 men who spent the night with George, including Josh Assen and 3 Russians. However, their testimonies were inconsistent with those of other witnesses, adding to the confusion. Despite the lengthy investigation and multiple theories, the truth behind George's disappearance remains unknown. His family continues to seek answers, suspecting foul play and initially pointing fingers at Jennifer, his new wife. However, they eventually cleared her of suspicion and received a payout from the cruise company. The family used the payout to secure the release of the investigation results, including witness statements and other evidence. Jennifer, now exonerated, dedicated herself to charity work in George's memory. Years later, Jennifer remarried, but the case remains unsolved. The FBI closed the investigation due to lack of evidence, ruling George's death an accident. The mystery surrounding his disappearance continues to haunt his family, who are still searching for the truth and a sense of closure. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shannon Monty. Shannon Monty was born on April 6, 1997. When she was a young child, her parents immigrated to the United States and settled in Waukesha, Wisconsin, where she grew up and attended school. Her parents thought Waukesha was an ideal place to raise their children because of its friendly atmosphere and good schools. Shannon was a bright, attractive, and outgoing person who made friends easily. After graduating from high school in 2015, Shannon enrolled at the University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee. She was interested in social work and wanted to help people in need. Despite her busy schedule, she worked part-time at an organic food company with her father. It was there that she met Quentin Neal, a 26-year-old man who shared her passion for helping others. They bonded quickly over their similar values and interests. Shannon had always dreamed of building a shelter for women and children, and Quentin was equally committed to making a positive impact. As their friendship blossomed into romance, they decided to live together. Shannon was thrilled to have found someone like Quentin, who cared deeply for her and made their relationship a happy and fulfilling one. Shannon's parents were making plans with her for their future together until her sudden disappearance. On April 13, 2018, Shannon failed to pick up her younger brother from school and didn't show up for work, which was unusual for her. Her phone was found to be turned off, and she had not informed anyone that she would be missing her shift. Her parents went to the police station the same day, unable to locate their daughter on their own. Initially, detectives thought that Shannon, being young, might have simply run away with friends or taken a spontaneous trip. However, her parents quickly dismissed this idea, as it was out of character for Shannon to cut off contact and ignore her family's worry. Shannon's mother provided crucial details to the investigators, which led them to take the case more seriously and pursue it further. Shannon's room still contained some of her money, documents, and valuables, which was a concerning factor in her disappearance. When questioned, Shannon's parents revealed that her boyfriend was 27-year-old Quentin Neal. When investigators contacted Quentin by phone, he claimed to have no knowledge of Shannon's whereabouts. Shannon had been living with her parents, and Quentin said he hadn't seen Shannon that day. The investigators asked Quentin to come to the police station for questioning. Quentin appeared anxious and agreed to come immediately. When he arrived, Shannon's parents were still present. Quentin told the investigators that the last time he saw Shannon was over 24 hours ago, when she left his house to pick up her little brother from school. The investigators asked Quentin if he knew where Shannon might be, but he didn't have any idea. However, he did remember that another man had been interested in Shannon, despite knowing she was in a relationship and pregnant. According to Quentin, this man continued to pursue Shannon even after she told him to leave her alone. The next day, the police began interviewing Shannon's friends to gather more information. They also distributed details about the search for Shannon to all police stations in Wisconsin. Later that day, they found a disturbing discovery that Shannon's car was found in Milwaukee, about 20 minutes from her home. Forensic investigators thoroughly examined the car but found no signs of a crime, such as a carjacking or struggle. Shannon's purse and phone were missing, but they did find fingerprints from 3 people: Shannon, Quentin, and an unknown individual. The man mentioned by Quentin was brought in for questioning. He claimed to be distraught over Shannon's disappearance, but denied Quentin's allegations, saying they were merely friends and never pursued a romantic relationship. However, a significant break in the case came when Angshuman, Shannon's mother, found Shannon's Apple Watch and reviewed Shannon's text messages. She took the watch to the police station, allowing investigators to examine it further. The investigators discovered that Quentin and Shannon had arranged to meet on the day she went missing, contradicting Quentin's earlier statement. The text messages also revealed that Quentin had been abusive towards Shannon, although she was pregnant with his child. Quentin had apologized for his behavior and begged her not to leave him. The investigators suspected Quentin was not a good person due to his criminal history, including a prison sentence for robbery and multiple arrests for assault and minor offenses. Shannon's parents had become increasingly suspicious of him as they noticed their daughter was often depressed. Quentin's emotional instability regarding the baby Shannon was expecting only added to their concerns. After Shannon told her parents about the pregnancy, they met with Quentin, who promised to care for both Shannon and the baby. However, Shannon's mother later discovered severe bruising on her daughter's arms and learned that Quentin was responsible for the injuries. When Shannon's cell phone was last detected near Quentin's residence on April 13th, the investigators became worried they might not find her alive. They quickly obtained a search warrant and searched Quentin's house, but initially found no signs of a crime scene or struggle, as the place was clean and appeared normal. Forensics investigators used luminol on the first floor, but it revealed no evidence. However, when they applied it to the basement, they found numerous traces, strongly suggesting that Shannon was likely deceased. Quentin Neal was subsequently arrested and taken into custody. Before questioning him, investigators analyzed his phone records, discovering that he had recently searched online for ways to remove evidence of a crime using a certain chemical. He was apparently trying to conceal his involvement. During the interrogation, Quinton repeatedly denied any knowledge of Shannon's whereabouts and claimed to have no connection to her disappearance. The investigators finally had concrete evidence, which led Quinton to change his story. He eventually agreed to confess to the crime, but he claimed he acted in self-defense when he took Shannon's life. Quinton explained that Shannon had visited his house to discuss their future and their child. However, the conversation turned into an argument, and Shannon went into the kitchen. She picked up a knife and gun stored there for emergencies. According to Quinton, Shannon then threatened him, prompting him to act quickly. The two got into a physical altercation, which ultimately ended in Shannon's death. Quinton stressed to the investigators that he had only defended himself. Although they were skeptical due to Quinton's lack of defensive wounds, they continued to listen to his account. Quinton Neal panicked when he realized he had done something irreversible. He hid evidence of the crime in a large suitcase in the basement of his house, where the incident occurred. Later, he led the police to a storage unit 6 miles from his residence, where the suitcase was stored. Inside, detectives found the body of Shannon, Quinton's girlfriend, who was pregnant at the time. Shannon's wrists and ankles were bound with duct tape, contradicting Quinton's claim of self-defense. Forensic experts determined that Shannon died from 2 gunshot wounds to the head and had additional knife wounds on her body. On April 18, 2018, detectives informed Shannon's parents of the devastating discovery. Quinton was subsequently indicted for the murder of Shannon and her unborn child. The evidence gathered, including their correspondence on the day of the incident, was sufficient to secure a guilty verdict. According to the evidence, Shannon had visited Quinton's house to discuss her pregnancy, but an argument ensued, and she never left the house alive. The trial of Quinton Neal was initially set to begin in the spring of 2019, but it was delayed by 3 months due to anonymous letters received by attorneys and court officials just days before the start date. These letters claimed that someone other than Quinton Neal was responsible for Shannon's death. However, when the author of the letters was identified as one of Quinton's friends, who had written them in an attempt to confuse the investigation and help Quinton, the judge ruled that the letters were not relevant. Quinton Neal was facing the possibility of capital punishment and denied the charges against him, claiming he had acted in self-defense. 15 months had passed since Shannon's death, and her family was eager for justice. Before her death, Shannon had been working to support victims of domestic violence and help women and children. Her family had planned to build a shelter home, a dream that was put on hold when Shannon became a victim herself. On July 15, 2019, Quinton Neal accepted a plea deal with investigators, admitting his guilt in the murder of Shannon and her child. As part of the agreement, prosecutors dropped their pursuit of the death penalty. 2 days later, on July 17, 2019, Neal was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences by the Milwaukee County Circuit Court. He will not be eligible for parole, ensuring he will spend the remainder of his life in prison. During his sentencing, Neal remained silent, never explaining his motivations for the crime. Shannon's family expressed relief that justice had been served. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. This narrative recounts a tragic event that occurred within an Indian family, where one person's happiness turned into another's misfortune. Jessica Patel was born on September 16, 1983. Her family resided in a Hindu community in Leeds, West Yorkshire, England. As the eldest child, she was diligent and obedient from a young age. Jessica excelled academically and helped around the house while maintaining a cheerful disposition. Jessica had many friends, but shared a special bond with me, a boy 3 years older than her. Unlike Jessica's vibrant personality, I was modest and shy. We often played together during childhood. As she grew older, Jessica blossomed into a beauty with aspirations akin to her peers. She dreamt of falling in love with a worthy man and having a happy family with many children, just like the heroes of her favorite movies. Despite her romantic fantasies, Jessica remained intelligent and purposeful. She aimed for independence and sought to establish herself in life. In 2002, she enrolled at De Montfort University in Leicester. 4 years later, she continued her pharmacy studies at the University of Manchester. During this time, Jessica reconnected with Mesh, who happened to be studying at the same faculty. Though they didn't initially see each other in person, Mesh had matured into a confident and handsome man. Gradually, their friendship blossomed into romantic feelings. Mesh often showered her with compliments and gifts, always being very attentive and caring. However, life took an unexpected turn for Jessica. Her mother succumbed to an incurable disease, leaving her grief-stricken. Mesh supported her through this tough period and didn't leave her alone with her sorrowful thoughts. Their relationship grew stronger during these trying times. Jessica even confided in her sister that she had finally found a dependable partner. It seemed like Mesh was perfect in every way. In 2008, Mesh Patel asked Jessica's father for her hand in marriage according to Hindu traditions. Her father was not particularly fond of Mesh as a candidate for his daughter's husband and felt it was too soon for marriage. But Jessica managed to convince him otherwise, and their wedding took place in July 2009 in the garden of her parental home. Initially, their married life appeared as beautiful as the wedding itself. However, soon after, Mesh's behavior changed. He became distant and cold. Jessica found herself feeling lonely and complained to her sisters about this shift in his demeanor. Their intimate life also suffered significantly. They didn't have any intimacy for about 10 months after getting married. This upset Jessica greatly. She couldn't understand what had happened to their previous feelings. In 2010, Jessica graduated from university, which gave her the chance to start a career as a pharmacist, something she looked forward to. Yet despite having higher education and a husband by her side, happiness eluded her due to Mesh's changing attitude. Mesh became increasingly controlling and suspicious, monitoring her every move closely. Another wave of tragedy hit when Jessica's grandfather fell gravely ill. His health deteriorated rapidly. Her sister Manal later revealed that Mesh did not permit Jessica to stay with or frequently visit her parents during this critical time. This caused considerable strain between the spouses. There was a conflict between the young woman and her spouse that she did not comprehend. She openly expressed her confusion to Mitesh. However, this only fueled his anger, leading him to hit the unfortunate woman in the face. Both individuals came from traditional Indian families where the head of the family makes all final decisions. Thus, she felt compelled to obey him. One day, feeling utterly lonely in her marriage, Jessica shared her concerns with her family. She suspected infidelity because every time Mitesh talked on the phone, he would go to another room and sometimes stayed up late at night alone. In 2012, her suspicions were confirmed when she accidentally discovered love correspondence on his phone. Hoping for support, Jessica confided in Mitesh's cousin, with whom she had previously communicated well. She expected help or advice to save her marriage. However, Mitesh's brother dismissed her concerns and implied it was all her fault if he was cheating. This response left Jessica without any understanding or support from her husband's relatives. Simultaneously, Mitesh forbade her from seeking solace with her own sisters. It was apparent that Mitesh was hiding something and feared losing not only his family's respect, but also that of the local community. To maintain control, he restricted his wife's communication in every possible way. In 2014, hoping for a fresh start, Mitesh and Jessica moved to Linor, a suburb of Middlesbrough in North Yorkshire, away from their families. They purchased a spacious house with many rooms and made renovations. A year later, they rented a premises where they opened their own pharmacy. Jessica believed this move would mark the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. Relations between them did improve slightly. However, they longed for children, which remained elusive. Throughout 6 years of marriage, Jessica could not conceive a child, which led Mitesh to hint at leaving if this situation did not change. In October 2015, Jessica decided to resort to IVF treatments despite previous unsuccessful attempts. The process took an emotional toll on her. She became increasingly nervous and depressed due to hormonal treatments, coupled with lack of support from Mitesh, who grew distant again. In public, he continued to pretend being a courteous husband, but reverted upon arriving home, glued to his phone and often displaying anger. The tension escalated until Jessica could no longer bear it, prompting discussions about separation as a potential solution. She told her husband that she was disappointed in him and unhappy in their marriage. The man's response surprised her. He began to assure her that he loved her and that, with time, everything would get better. He emphasized that the best way to strengthen family ties would be to have a baby. Jessica believed his words. She had not heard anything like that for a long time. After receiving a small portion of attention, she calmed down. He convinced her, or so it seemed, that he wanted children and a complete family. On May 9, 2018, the Patel couple received great news. 3 embryos were successfully fertilized. Their transfer was scheduled for the next month. This meant that soon, with the successful development of events, they would become parents. The future mom was overjoyed. She was so happy that she hurried to tell her family about everything. Everyone looked forward to the new addition, except it didn't happen. A few days later, in mysterious circumstances on the evening of May 14, 2018, the emergency service received a call from Mitesh Patel, who found his wife's dead body wrapped in duct tape at home. Gasping with shock, the man said he had left home to buy something to eat and visit colleagues at work to pick up his laptop. Upon returning home, he found his house burglarized and his wife lying unconscious. Sobbing, he added that Jessica's skin felt very cold and dark marks were visible on her neck. The dispatcher informed Patel that help was close at hand with a police unit on its way. When officers arrived on scene, they found Jessica's body on the living room floor, her wrists and ankles bound with duct tape, and a grocery store bag nearby. Unfortunately, there was nothing paramedics could do. Investigators needed to figure out what motivated such a brutal crime. Criminals were clearly searching for something, as they even ripped up the mattress of the couple's bed and discovered jewelry and cash missing. Everything appeared to point to a robbery. The husband of the murdered woman was convinced that robbers had broken into their home. In his statement, Mesh shared that, on that unfortunate day, he worked his morning shift, then proceeded to the gym after work. He returned home later in the evening. His spouse came back around 7 p.m. The man then offered to get a pizza and left the house at 7:44 p.m. Thanks to a CCTV camera at a local pizzeria, his account was confirmed. It recorded Patel placing the order. He was friendly with the staff and appeared relaxed. Before leaving the establishment, he tried calling his wife to inform her he'd be back soon, but couldn't reach her. On his way out, Mitesh decided to stop by a pharmacy, which extended his time away longer than expected. At 8:50 p.m., when he returned home, he witnessed a distressing scene. Belongings were scattered and his wife was bound. Neighbors were equally shocked by what had occurred. The neighborhood where they lived was regarded as one of the most affluent and tranquil areas. No criminal activities had ever transpired there before. Jessica's autopsy revealed strangulation as the cause of death. The attacker initially used a bag for this purpose, then resorted to using his bare hands. Finally, perhaps to ensure her demise, an electrical cord was employed as a ligature. Since there were no signs of forced entry, investigators proposed that Jessica knew her assailant and let them into the house herself. As soon as Jessica's family learned about her death, her father and sisters immediately came to support Mitesh in his grief. It's not surprising because in such tragic moments, families often rally together. They endeavored to comfort Mitesh despite knowing that the relationship between him and Jessica hadn't always been simple. The deceased woman's relatives embraced their grieving son-in-law and sought words of solace while grappling with their own sorrow. However, despite initial appearances, police harbored suspicions about the robbery scenario. After thoroughly searching the house, officers uncovered some clues that swiftly led to the criminal's apprehension and subsequent trial. Additionally, an application on Jessica's cell phone played a significant role by providing important insights into her health monitoring data at crucial times. 3 days after Jessica's murder, the lead investigator contacted her father, who was still near the crime scene. The official requested that the family return home to avoid obstructing the investigation, promising more details later. In actuality, detectives were on the verge of detaining their suspect, Mesh Patel. There were compelling reasons for Mesh's arrest. During a search of the house, authorities found a hard disk from a video surveillance camera installed by the front door. This device was located in a suitcase under the bed. It was determined that someone had damaged it just minutes before police arrived. Another critical piece of evidence was a photograph hidden under a double bottom of the couple's nightstand. It depicted Mesh in an embrace with another man named Amit. Additionally, footage from a camera installed in a house across the street showed that on May 14th, only Mesh and Jessica entered and exited their home all day. The footage captured Mesh returning at 3:30 p.m. and not leaving again. Jessica arrived at 7 p.m., parked her car, and entered their home. Mesh left for a pizza place at 7:44 p.m. and came back at 8:50 p.m. No one else entered or exited during this period, making Mesh the prime suspect. Despite this evidence making him look guilty, there was no direct proof against him yet. So detectives dug deeper into his life during their investigation. It turned out that Mesh had been hiding something significant from both his family and friends. While Jessica had suspected her husband of infidelity, she may not have known that he exclusively liked men. It increasingly seemed likely that his marriage to Jessica served as a cover for his true orientation, a heartbreaking revelation for someone who thought they had shared years of happiness with him. A terrible plan forming in Mite's head. He and his lover wanted to begin a family and become same-sex parents using Jessica's embryos and a surrogate. Patel revealed in a message that his spouse was undergoing IVF. During this time, he asked Amit if they would be together after the procedure. Amit's response was that it depended on the outcome. As their communication continued, Mite made clear that eventually there would be no obstacles in their relationship. In a recent message, he mentioned that Jessica's days were numbered. It was later discovered that Patel was taking drugs affecting childbearing to avoid intimate relations with his wife. Investigators found incriminating evidence by reconstructing Mite's search history on the internet. His search queries were deeply revealing: how to get rid of his wife, Hindu funeral practices, procedures for obtaining insurance payments after a spouse's murder. Jessica's life was insured for £2 million. After her death, he planned to cash in on the insurance policy and use the money to buy property in Australia. In recent weeks, Patel had been searching for a suitable home to create comfortable conditions for his new family and carefully preparing for it. During the investigation of the couple's cell phones, aside from damning communications, investigators focused on an app tracking step counts on Jessica's phone. They found that since 8:04 p.m., she hadn't moved again. After 15 minutes, her phone recorded a movement of 14 steps. These seemed to be her last movements, or someone moved the device. For Mesh's activity, his phone showed high physical activity readings just before his wife's murder. His rate spiked above normal. He went up and down stairs between 7:44 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. At this point, he was staging a burglary by throwing things around the house. Before calling 911, Patel went upstairs to hide evidence: a hard drive from a surveillance camera in the pharmacy's safe. The couple owned the pharmacy. Police found stolen jewelry, £25,000, and a couple of gold bars there, items which the widower claimed had gone missing during the robbery. They also found duct tape similar to that used to bind the victim's arms and legs. The torn end of the tape matched evidence from Jessica's body. It appeared that Mesh stopped by work after the pizza party to dispose of evidence. Though he planned the crime for years, he left a mess everywhere: and was careless in execution. There was no doubt about his guilt. Genetic examination of material from under Jessica's fingernails identified Meisha's DNA. Scratch marks on his neck were visible. He did not even try to hide them, claiming they resulted from a fall. During trial and afterward, Patel did not admit guilt, neither during investigation nor trial. He insisted communication with Ahit was coincidental. The trial lasted 3 weeks and established what happened. The husband attacked his wife as she entered the house. She fought back, but could not match his strength. Initially, he chose another method, a large dose of insulin found in her blood, which could have been fatal but slower than expected. Insulin overdose leads to coma and death gradually. However, anything could happen. Eventually, Meisha put a bag over Jessica's head to ensure she was dead, finally ending her life as per his plan. He strangled her with his hands, then used cord. The prosecution presented empty ampoules found in Patel's laptop bag as evidence. It took him 20 minutes to take the life of a woman who had been by his side years and shared the same house. The man exhibited incredible cruelty towards her. Afterward, he tied up his wife's hands and feet, attempting to make it look like a robbery. Following this, he drove to a pizza place as if nothing had happened and even called her. Jessica's family was in complete shock upon hearing this news. Neither side of the family could believe what they were hearing. No one would listen or believe Jessica when she sought help and support. No one even stepped in to try to understand what was happening within the family, except perhaps Jessica's sisters. The jury needed just 2 hours to reach a verdict on December 5, 2018. The court sentenced Mitesh Patel to life in prison with the right to parole after 30 years. The judge stated that it did not seem like Patel had any remorse. In all likelihood, he only felt sorry for himself. It is unlikely that the family will ever forgive him for the sin he committed. They pray for Jessica every day and remember her according to Hindu beliefs. Her soul must be reborn since she suffered greatly in life but remained a good person. In her next incarnation, she will be rewarded. At least that's the comfort her loved ones cling to as they mourn and hope for a reunion after death. In June 2018, in Melbourne, Australia, a promising comedian named Yuri Dixon showcased her talent on stage at a bar. Her performance was bold and often delved into the theme of gender equality. These moments, captured in photographs by a colleague, turned out to be the final images of the 22-year-old. Unbeknown to anyone at the time, just hours after these photos were taken, Yuri Dixon's life would be tragically cut short. Jane Dixon was born on November 10, 1995, in Melbourne, Australia. She grew up in a closely knit family. 6 years after her birth, her younger sister arrived. Tragically, a year later, their mother passed away due to severe substance dependence issues. This left their father, Jeremy Dixon, with the sole responsibility of raising his daughters. He worked tirelessly, and the Dixon family led a modest life in a small top-floor apartment of a 3-story building. Neighbors remembered Jane as a quiet, polite, and somewhat reserved young girl. Her friends affectionately referred to her as Ray. She had a passion for the arts. She pursued dramaturgy at Deakin University and participated in a theater troupe. Jane was not only an actress and comedian, but also a writer who created her own scripts for performances. Jane's love for drama was evident. Like many comedians, she relished challenging societal norms, a trait that consistently shone through in her acts. In 2018, at the age of 22, Jane Dixon made a significant mark at the International Comedy Festival in Melbourne with her solo stand-up show titled, "At Home, I Feel Like a Tourist." Her performance captivated the audience and elicited roars of laughter with her loud and daring humor. Jane demonstrated a fearless approach to comedy by addressing complex and often challenging topics to diverse audiences. Despite her success, Some of her humor occasionally missed the mark with younger audience members. Nonetheless, Yuri Dixon was a feminist who fearlessly incorporated her values into her humor. She was deeply engaged with issues pertaining to women and social justice, often choosing these themes for her performances. Her social media bio read, "I'm a girl sometimes perplexed by the world around me. This show and my jokes are about that." Her friends saw a bright future for her on stage, believing Dixon to be a promising talent. Colleagues described her as introverted and quiet, yet exceptionally intelligent for her age. Both groups unanimously agreed that Dixon possessed a genuine comedic gift. Yuri Dixon performed in bars for free, using these opportunities to gain experience, attract fans, learn how to captivate an audience, and sharpen her skills. On Tuesday, June 12, 2018, Yuri Dixon performed at a local bar just 3 miles from her home. That night, as usual, she humorously tackled gender equality and her constant worries. "Sometimes I think, will I wake up in a society of slaves? You know, just girl jokes, just ordinary stuff," she joked in her last act. She whimsically spoke about robots taking over the world, hoping that by then we'd all be gone. She remarked that a robot-ruled world wouldn't be bleak, as it would mean gender equality, everyone subjugated to robots equally. Following her performance, Yuri Dixon met with her boyfriend Tony Magnuson, who had been in the audience. They shared a soda at the bar. At 10:40 p.m., they left and stopped at a nearby supermarket to buy protein bars. Then Yuri decided to walk home alone. They embraced, said their goodbyes, and Tony got on a tram as Yuri sent him an air kiss and waved goodbye. Yuri was unaware that she was being observed by someone, not just a casual onlooker, but a predator. Yuri Dixon's journey home spanned streets, a park, and 3 soccer fields, covering about 3 miles. This was usually an hour's walk at a relaxed pace, and she felt the route was safe, having walked it at night before. The streets were well lit, but upon entering Princess Park, darkness enveloped her. To shorten her path, she removed her shoes and socks, walking barefoot on the grass. She traversed the park and 2 soccer fields, with just a short distance remaining to her home at midnight, exactly 12:02 a.m. Yuri messaged her boyfriend Tony on Facebook, "I'm almost home. Where are you?" Mere minutes. Following this message, a tragic event took place on the night of June 13th at approximately 2:50 a.m. A passerby found Yuri Dixon on a soccer field in Princess Park. The passerby quickly called for an ambulance and police, attempting to administer CPR to Dixon. Unfortunately, it was already too late. Yuri had been strangled and was already deceased. Surveillance cameras were installed around the park. The police promptly reviewed the footage and spotted Dixon walking alone through the park with a young man following her at a distance of about 100 feet. This individual had fluffy golden hair, unkempt stubble, and appeared overweight, short, and stocky, moving with a bear-like shuffle. To advance the investigation, the police released the surveillance video to local TV channels and made a public appeal for anyone who recognized this person to come forward. On the evening of June 13th, 19-year-old James Todd contacted the police. He reported that friends had been calling him after seeing his face on the news in connection with Yuri Dixon's death in Princess Park. James firmly denied any involvement in her death and insisted he was not the person in the footage. The police requested that James come to the station for questioning. Upon arrival, he continued asserting his innocence, responding to numerous questions and maintaining he had no connection to the crime. Additionally, James agreed to provide a DNA sample. After Yuri Dixon's body was found, an impromptu memorial emerged at the site where people brought flowers to honor her memory. A significant crowd, numbering in tens of thousands, gathered to remember her on June 18, 2018, 5 days after the tragedy. A vigil was scheduled on the football field in Yuri's memory. However, this event was overshadowed by a disturbing act that occurred the night before the vigil, when someone painted an enormous 75-foot depiction of male genitalia on the grass. Firefighters and municipal workers discovered it upon arrival. This heinous act did not diminish the community's resolve, as they came together to honor Yuri's memory with dignity and respect despite these unfortunate events. Removing the paint proved impossible, so the team had to excavate and replace sections of the lawn, costing $20,000. The culprit was quickly identified as Andrew Null, a 29-year-old blogger and men's rights activist who was also a Scientologist. Null openly admitted that his motive was to provoke anger among feminists. Initially, James Todd insisted on his innocence. However, during a follow-up interrogation, when the detective mentioned DNA evidence from the crime scene undergoing analysis, Todd's demeanor changed. He lowered his head and stated further testing was unnecessary. Todd then confessed to being in Princess Park on the night of Yuri Dixon's tragic death and admitted his guilt in her murder and assault. In November 2018, James Todd recounted in detail his activities on June 12th. His day began with college classes in Broadmeadows, a suburb of Melbourne, which lasted until 3 p.m. After classes, James met 3 college friends at the station. They bought strong liquor and rolling papers for cigarettes before taking a train to Melbourne. They spent some time in Batman Park sharing alcohol. When they ran out of booze, James purchased cider and obtained marijuana from some individuals around 8 p.m. One friend left while James and the remaining 2 headed back to the station, where they purchased another bottle of liquor and Coca-Cola. The trio then took a train back towards Broadmeadows, each disembarking at different stations. James got off first at Newmarket Station around 9 p.m., while his friends continued their journey. James described how after disembarking at Newmarket Station around 9:35 p.m., he aimlessly roamed the streets. He made his way towards Elizabeth Street and at 10:43 p.m. first noticed Yuri Dixon near a supermarket with her boyfriend Tony. After stopping briefly at McDonald's for a snack, James returned to where he initially saw Yuri. He observed her blowing a kiss to her boyfriend as he left. Yuri then started her walk home with James discreetly following her. She seemed unaware of his presence. However, he experienced a strong, inexplicable attraction towards her. James decided to follow the young woman in a black dress, later identified as 22-year-old Eurydice Dixon. He shadowed her for approximately an hour across the city, maintaining a distance of about 150 feet between them. Whenever Eurydice slowed down, James would pause to smoke. Surveillance cameras recorded them passing by the University of Melbourne at 11:54 p.m. Shortly afterwards, Eurydice texted her boyfriend, Tony, informing him that she was nearly home. This message was sent as she walked through Princess Park. Just minutes after sending that text, around midnight, Eurydice found herself in a life-threatening situation. As she was crossing the 3rd soccer field, James Todd approached her from behind. He grabbed her hair and dress, knocked her down, and pinned her to the ground. James then sat on her chest and seized her neck. In a desperate attempt to defend herself, Eurydice fought back, scratching at his face, neck, and shoulders. Despite her efforts, James overpowered her. After satisfying his urges, he briefly contemplated repeating his actions but lacked the physical strength. Ultimately, he forcibly strangled Eurydice until she passed away. James Todd later told investigators that upon first seeing Eurydice, he assumed she was intoxicated and wanted to engage her in conversation, as he thought it would be amusing. Contrary to his assumption, the autopsy conducted on Eurydice revealed no presence of alcohol or illegal substances in her system. The medical examiners concluded that Dixon's cause of death was due to strangulation accompanied by blunt force trauma to her head and other parts of her body. After committing the crime, James took the victim's phone and left the park. He found a bench at a bus stop and slept there until 4 a.m. Upon waking up, he used the phone to take a selfie to check the scratches on his face and body. He then went into some bushes nearby where he used the restroom and removed his t-shirt, wiping himself with it before leaving it behind. It had an image of a skull, along with the caption, "What Men Fear." James then returned to Princess Park, where police were already conducting their investigation into the harrowing incident. He left the park, reached a stop, and then made his way home, purchasing coffee and a pie along the way. By 7 a.m., he was home, where immediately went online to look up Princess Park. The first news he came across was about the tragic incident. Following this, he began searching for adult films, specifically looking for content similar to what had transpired with Juicy the previous night. He meticulously went through 4 pages of search results. That evening, a friend informed him that he had been seen on TV in a news report about the deceased girl. Following this call, James obtained the number for the police station and decided to contact them. Investigators discovered that James Todd's visits to explicit websites and his interest in certain types of videos were not new behaviors. In the years preceding the crime, James had harbored fantasies involving violent acts. His girlfriend, who had been in a relationship with him for 4 years, noted that during intimate moments he had a tendency to grab her neck. However, further investigation into his internet search history revealed that James was exploring much more extreme and violent scenarios than what he had exhibited in their relationship. 19-year-old James Todd was both a student and worker, aspiring to a career as a restaurateur and pursuing education in that field. He lived with his parents and had a habit of staying up late to watch adult videos. Specifically, he gravitated towards videos where a woman inevitably met her demise at the end. This obsession grew to such an extent that he yearned to recreate them in real life. This compulsive idea increasingly dominated his thoughts, disturbing his peace and impacting his ability to live normally. James Todd's living conditions were extremely poor. When police visited his family's home, they described it as one of the most dilapidated residences they had ever encountered. The Todd household comprised 5 members, the parents and 3 sons, with James being the middle child. In sum, these findings painted a broader picture of James's deteriorating mental state and unhealthy obsessions, which ultimately culminated in tragic actions affecting not only himself but those around him too. Their living environment was in complete disarray, compounded by the presence of numerous pets and a kitchen that had collapsed due to rotting floors. Cooking had been reduced to using a stove placed in the bathroom, right next to a perpetually clogged toilet. Clutter, trash, and debris filled every room, making the house nearly uninhabitable. Food waste was scattered wherever it fell. James rarely spent time at home, opting instead to sleep on desks during classes or on park benches. His mother admitted that the grim state of their home was partly due to her struggle with depression. Nevertheless, James stated that their living conditions had always been neglected. The father's role or involvement in the family situation was not specifically mentioned. Before committing the crime, James Todd had already distanced himself from his family home. He preferred to spend most of his time at his girlfriend's residence. His girlfriend noticed a change in his behavior, which she attributed to the stress of finishing college and uncertainty about his future prospects in the restaurant industry. During the trial, it was revealed that James had been diagnosed in childhood with mild autism spectrum disorder and ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. He exhibited intense interest in dinosaurs, playing almost exclusively with dinosaur toys, and frequently having tantrums over various everyday situations, such as issues with food and household items. In his teenage years, James Todd received psychiatric treatment numerous times due to concerns from his teachers about his antisocial behavior. It's essential to understand that autism or Asperger's syndrome presents diversely and is not inherently linked to harmful sexual tendencies. In James's case, 2 psychiatrists who had worked with him and thoroughly reviewed his condition concluded he exhibited signs of a sadistic personality disorder. They believed this disorder contributed significantly to the tragic events. Both medical professionals agreed there is no direct causal relationship between autism and criminal behavior. They suggested that, in James' case, the interplay of his autism and the sadistic elements of his personality likely played a role, leading to the tragic outcome. James Todd's friends saw him as a sociable and cheerful individual, not seeming different from others. They noticed he could apologize, distinguish right from wrong, and behave rationally. However, a psychiatrist who assessed him found a deficit in his social interactions, indicating possible underlying issues. During the legal proceedings, Two psychiatrists presented differing views on Todd's crime. One psychiatrist believed that James hadn't fully decided to commit the attack until the moment it started, suggesting his actions were somewhat spontaneous. In contrast, the other psychiatrist argued that James's primary intention was to actualize his disturbing fantasies. This view suggests that Todd knew what might happen with Yuri and acted deliberately to fulfill these fantasies. At the trial, James Todd made a striking declaration. He felt relieved at being caught. He admitted feeling terrified when he realized he had turned his long-held thoughts into reality. The judge concluded that James had intentionally murdered a defenseless young woman driven by perverse desires and the intent to manifest his depraved fantasies. On September 2, 2019, James Todd was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after serving 35 years. When eligible for parole, he will be 54 years old. Jason Todd, James Todd's father, took to social media to express condolences to the Dixon family and conveyed his personal sense of loss. He mentioned fearing that he might never have the opportunity to hug his son again, along with these sentiments. Jason shared screenshots of various insults and criticisms directed at him, labeling those who criticized him as spiteful. After, he decided to delete all these posts from his social media page. Todd's legal team sought to appeal his life sentence, arguing it was excessively severe. They highlighted several factors in their argument. Todd was only 19 at the time of the offense, had no prior criminal history, and many described him as a good and kind individual. Additionally, his lawyers pointed to his full admission of guilt and expressed remorse, along with his autism diagnosis and the deplorable living conditions in his family home, as mitigating circumstances. Despite these arguments, the appeal was ultimately rejected. Detectives who worked on the Dixon case noted that James Todd's current prison cell offers significantly better living conditions compared to his former home. He's known to keep his cell exceptionally clean. Todd reportedly feels deep remorse for his actions, and life seems especially tough for him compared to typical inmates. Psychiatrists on the case believe that if Todd were released, he would pose a significant threat to women. Following the unfortunate death of Yuri Dixon, the bar where she had her last comedy performance decided to cancel their Tuesday comedy nights in her honor, aiming to continue her legacy. Additionally, the Melbourne government introduced grants aimed at supporting emerging female comedians. Regarding blogger Andrew Ench, who desecrated Yuri Dixon's memorials, he was found guilty and sentenced to 5 months in prison. This incident brought some notoriety to Ench, leading him to give several interviews afterward. In one of these interviews, he disclosed that his actions were not merely an expression of his stance against feminism, but also stemmed from his vocal criticism of vaccination. He believes vaccines cause autism. The tragic passing of Yuri Dixon reignited discussions on women's safety and gender inequality. In response to the incident, police advised women to be more vigilant at night, suggesting they avoid walking alone and always carry a mobile phone. On the other hand, many feminists argue that it shouldn't fall on women to change their habits. They stress that the real solution is stopping men from committing physical and psychological violence against women. Feminists advocate for a woman's right to walk freely and safely at any time and place. The case of Gabriela Alcaino. Teens' rejection leads to tragedy. Teenagers can sometimes display aggression towards their peers, behavior often dismissed as part of growing up, with hopes they'll outgrow it. Yet we sometimes overlook the severity of such actions, as a violent teenager can pose a serious threat to their surroundings. Moreover, this unstable age often coincides with first loves, and when those feelings are not reciprocated, it can lead to tragedies. Such was the case with Gabriela Alcaino, a schoolgirl whose story shocked not only Chile, where the tragedy took place, but all of Latin America, leading to the enactment of the Gabriela Law. The girl met a tragic end at the hands of her boyfriend, a fellow teenager. She had broken up with him due to his temper and controlling behavior. The boy didn't take it well, resolving the matter in the most drastic way. He assaulted and took the life of the girl to whom he had recently professed love. He also took the life of the girl's mother, who became an accidental witness. Family and friends of the victim later claimed the tragedy could have been avoided, as the suspect had been stalking and harassing his victim. He broke into her home, stalked her in various places, and threatened to take her life if she didn't return. Dozens of witnesses heard these threats, but no one imagined he would follow through. Who was Gabriela Alcaino? Gabriela Alcaino Donoso was born on May 17, 2001, in the capital of Chile, Santiago. She was the only child of Federico Alcaino and Carolina Donoso Campos, and the first grandchild in a large, loving family. Her paternal uncle Rodrigo became her godfather and doted on her, just as her grandfather Carlos saw her as the center of his universe. Gabriela grew up surrounded by love and care. Her family wasn't wealthy, but they belonged to the middle class, doing everything they could to provide Gabriela with a good life, a solid education, and a good upbringing. When she was only 5 years old, her parents decided to divorce. Gabriela lived with her mother, who didn't remarry and devoted herself to raising her only child. Her father soon remarried, and Gabriela gained 2 younger half-brothers. Despite his new family, Federico continued to support his ex-wife and daughter financially and stayed involved in Gabriela's life and upbringing. Gabriela was a kind, open, and friendly child. She was somewhat shy and modest, but this didn't prevent her from making friends and getting along with her peers. She had an angelic appearance, which elicited admiration and delight from all who knew her. Gabriela excelled at school, loved music and dancing, and was also good at drawing. Her parents did their best to nurture her talents. She adored her younger brothers, spending weekends and holidays at her father's house, which was nearby. Her childhood, overall, could be described as a happy and carefree time, surrounded by loving family members. First love. At 15 years old, Gabriela, like most of her peers, fell in love for the first time. The boy's name was Fabian Casares Aravan, a fellow student at her school who was only a year older. Their romantic relationship was initially innocent. They would walk hand in hand, eat ice cream at cafes, steal kisses, and generally appeared to be a happy couple. Fabian came from a respectable and intelligent family. His parents were well regarded and sought to provide him with a solid education and raise him to be a good person. However, Fabian himself was considered withdrawn and secretive, speaking to others reluctantly, avoiding direct eye contact, and always looking away. Given his non-confrontational nature, many assumed he was shy or had adolescent timidity, but it's more likely he suffered from social anxiety. Gabriela even introduced Fabian to her father, who approved of her choice, finding the young man calm, dependable, and rational. He had a serious conversation with the boy, asking him to take care of his daughter, and Fabian promised not to harm her or let others harm her. Initially, their relationship was harmonious, with Fabian genuinely trying to be attentive and caring. However, this harmony didn't last long. After a few months, his controlling and cruel side emerged. Cesare sought to control every aspect of Gabriela's life, exhibiting jealousy, deciding who she should and shouldn't associate with. He checked her phone, demanded immediate responses to his calls and messages at all hours, and when this didn't happen, threw tantrums. A young tyrant and tormentor. For the first 6 months of the relationship, Gabriela tried not to give too much importance to her boyfriend's outbursts of anger and jealousy. She was madly in love, tried to comply with all his demands, and naively believed that things would soon change, and her beloved would become the same sweet and caring boy who had recently won her heart. However, Fabian only grew more irritable, volatile, and aggressive. He began to wear Gabriela down emotionally, but over time, he stopped at mere verbal abuse. He might slap her, grab her hair, or her hands. In most cases, these actions didn't leave noticeable marks, But sometimes friends began to notice bruises on her wrists and shoulders, the places where Fabian had gripped her roughly and shaken her forcefully. Alcaino tried not to complain or tell anyone about what was happening, but her friends and family began noticing her depressed state and her eyes perpetually wet with tears. She was no longer the smiling, open, and sociable girl she once was, gradually distancing herself from friends, avoiding contact with those Fabian forbade her from speaking to. Repeatedly, Gabriela tried talking to her beloved, but to no avail. She also broke off their relationship several times, only to return under Fabian's pressure. This went on for over a year. Breakup, stalking, and threats. In the fall of 2017, Fabian found himself in trouble for attacking a classmate. Although the incident didn't occur at school, it wasn't clear what happened. He was accused of mistreatment and assault, facing possible jail time, but the case was settled out of court. Fabian was still expelled and had to complete his education through homeschooling. After this incident, Gabriela decided to end things with Fabian for good. However, he wasn't pleased. At first, he apologized, promised to change, and asked her to come back. But after her refusal, he began stalking, blackmailing, and threatening her if she didn't resume their relationship. Fabian lurked around Gabriela's school or home, even trying to climb into her room through the window. He called her dozens of times from different numbers, sent texts, voice messages, and social media messages, harassing Gabriela. His messages ranged from tearful apologies to threats, but Gabriela remained resolute in ending the relationship. Sometimes Fabian would disappear for a week or more, giving Gabriela hope he had moved on, but he'd reappear, terrorizing her and refusing to leave her alone. He followed her everywhere, like a shadow, and could show up at the most unexpected places, screaming and causing a scene. Gabriela grew fearful of being alone, always going places with friends or family. After school, she went to her mother's work, and they'd go home together. When she needed to travel, she asked her father or uncle to accompany her. This continued for several months, and Gabriela was exhausted, though she tried not to complain. The beginning of a series of tragic events. At the beginning of 2018, a terrible tragedy struck the Alcaino family when a burglar broke into the home of Federico's second wife and took her life. The children were at school, and Federico was at work, leaving her alone. The perpetrator, a previously convicted neighbor, was caught immediately. Gabriela and her mother did everything they could to support the grieving Federico and help him with the children. This tragedy temporarily distracted Gabriela from thoughts of Fabian, who disappeared during this period. Gabriela also focused on preparing for entrance exams, dreaming of becoming a student at one of the most prestigious universities in Santiago, with aspirations of studying journalism or advertising. However, the tragedy was just the first in a series of heartbreaking events for the Alcaino family. By May 2018, Fabian reappeared, beginning to stalk Gabriela obsessively. She felt unsafe everywhere, as her ex-boyfriend could climb over her home's fence or show up near her at the supermarket or mall. In early June, Gabriela sent her two closest friends screenshots of her messages with Fabian, along with some voice messages where he threatened her, demanding she resume their relationship. Gabriela admitted she feared for herself and her loved ones. However, she didn't tell her family about the stalking and threats to avoid worrying them. The last family celebration. On June 10, 2018, the Alcaino family gathered at grandfather Carlos's house to celebrate his 80th birthday. Sadly, this joyous family event turned out to be the last day of life for Gabriela and her mother, Carolina. The evening seemed happy and uneventful. The house was filled with laughter and music, and the large family enjoyed a big meal together, celebrating Carlos's milestone and wishing him good health and many more years. Gabriela played with her younger brothers and the children of her uncle Rodrigo, though she appeared somewhat troubled and distant. Her uncle decided to talk to her, asking if everything was all right and if anything was bothering her. Gabriela only gave a sad smile, shrugged, and said she was nervous without specifying why. The uncle chose not to press, thinking she'd share when ready, but later regretted this decision deeply. After the party, Federico drove his ex-wife and daughter home. He kissed Gabriela on the forehead, told her he loved her, and assured her she could count on his support in any situation. Then he returned home with his younger children. This was the last time he saw his eldest daughter and his first wife alive. A brutal crime. Around 4 a.m. on June 11th, Fabian, armed with a hunting knife, climbed over the fence of his ex-girlfriend's house. He intended to enter Gabriela's bedroom through the window and attack her, but suddenly the lights went on. The back door opened slightly, and Carolina appeared. She couldn't sleep and came to check on the noise. Fabian pounced on the unfortunate woman, pushed her back inside, and began stabbing her furiously. In total, he stabbed her 36 times, with most wounds landing on her chest, neck, and head, leaving her no chance of survival. Carolina managed only a couple of screams, but the noise woke Gabriela, who ran downstairs to find out what was happening. As she descended, she saw a bloodied and enraged Fabian, who caught and dragged her down. Gabriela held her phone, desperately trying to call emergency services, but couldn't. Fabian assaulted his ex-girlfriend, then stabbed her forcefully in the chest, piercing her heart. The single blow ended her life. He then moved her to the kitchen, where Carolina's lifeless body lay. He tried to erase his traces, wiping fingerprints and cleaning bloody footprints. He then washed himself and the murder weapon in the bathroom, and quietly left around 5:30 a.m., leaving the house unnoticed by neighbors. In the following days, he acted as though nothing had happened. The grim discovery and the first suspect colleagues began to worry when Carolina missed work for 2 days and didn't answer phone calls. She was responsible and wouldn't disappear without reason. Her boss contacted Federico to find out what had happened. Federico was shocked and tried calling Carolina, but her phone didn't answer, and Gabriela's was off. He called his brother Rodrigo, who hadn't seen or spoken to Gabriela or Carolina since they parted ways after Carlos's birthday. Federico then left work and headed to Carolina's house. The house seemed empty, but their car was in the garage. Federico circled the house twice, knocking on doors and peering through windows, but hesitated to go in, even though he had a spare key. He called the police, asking them to check the house. The officers, upon learning he had a key, wondered why he hadn't used it, but Federico expressed fear of what he might find inside. At 11 a.m., he opened the door and entered with the officers. They saw 2 lifeless bodies in pools of blood on the kitchen floor. Carolina and Gabriela had been dead for over a day, but Federico, overcome with grief, screamed for an ambulance, demanding someone save them. They calmed Federico, but his behavior aroused suspicion, and he was led outside to a police car for questioning. When he tried to leave the car and found the door locked, he demanded an explanation. Realizing he was now the main suspect in a double homicide, Federico was devastated. Federico couldn't understand how he could be suspected of taking his own daughter's life. Rodrigo soon arrived, and was also shocked that his brother wasn't released. He couldn't believe his niece was dead, asking why there wasn't an ambulance and why no one was trying to help. Both men were taken for questioning, and their alibis were thoroughly checked. Both were cleared, as they were with family at the time of the crime. Then, friends of the deceased were questioned, revealing that Gabriela had been stalked by her ex-boyfriend. They provided screenshots of his messages and voice recordings with threats. Easier to take her life than let her go. Federico recalled his daughter's obsessive suitor, whom she had tried unsuccessfully to break up with. He never imagined the seemingly pleasant boy Gabriela introduced to him could commit such a heinous crime. The police went to Fabian Cesares' house to investigate. After the double homicide, the young man lived a normal life, interacting with family and friends, visiting familiar places, and even posting a photo on social media, playing guitar at a party. When arrested on suspicion of murder, Fabian feigned surprise and grief, claiming he loved Gabriela and would never harm her. Fabian had disposed of the murder weapon and discarded some blood-stained clothes, but his shoes still had small drops of blood, and prints from his soles were found at the crime scene. Moreover, 4 of Gabriela's classmates testified that they had heard Fabian threaten her, shouting that it would be easier to take her life than let her go. Under pressure from evidence and witness testimonies, Fabian confessed to the crime but tried to portray himself as a heartbroken lover. He claimed he hadn't intended to harm Gabriela, only talked to her, but things escalated, and he dealt with her mother as an unwanted witness. Yet he couldn't explain why he brought a hunting knife just to talk. Will he get the minimum sentence? After the autopsy and necessary tests, the bodies of the victims were returned to their family for burial. Hundreds gathered at the funeral to honor the deceased and offer condolences to their loved ones. Gabriela was buried in the white dress she had dreamed of wearing, but never got the chance to. Carolina was laid to rest in a closed casket, as her face had been mutilated beyond recognition. Fabian's family hired a skilled lawyer who crafted a strong defense and promised a minimal sentence for his client. During preliminary hearings, he emphasized Fabian's youth and clean record, arguing that the attack on his classmate had been settled out of court. The victim's relatives pushed for a femicide charge, but it was denied by the prosecution, as Chile's law only applied it in cases where the victim and perpetrator were married or lived together. Since the teenagers hadn't been in a close relationship at the time of the crime, the case wasn't classified as femicide during the investigation. Additionally, the lawyer argued that Fabian acted impulsively and in a state of distress. Consequently, he faced a potential 15-year sentence for double homicide and assault. The Alcaino family, understandably, demanded the harshest punishment for him. After initial hearings, the judge allowed both prosecution and defense 6 months to gather evidence. Fabian's lawyer requested his release pending trial, but the judge denied this, keeping Fabian in custody. Gabriela's law. Gabriela's father was outraged. In a short span, he had lost 3 women close to him, all to violent deaths. Now, the person responsible for the deaths of his ex-wife and daughter might get away with a minimal sentence. The lawyer tried to shift the blame onto the victims, and the authorities seemed ready to accept this. So, Gabriela's father and uncle, together with women's rights organizations, developed a proposal for Gabriela's law, which would expand the definition of femicide to include romantic relationships, even if the perpetrator and victim weren't married or living together. They were soon joined by the National Office for Women and Gender Equality, which actively advocated for the law. The bill faced opposition, as the proposed amendments would mean that perpetrators already serving time for similar offenses could face new charges and lose eligibility for early release. However, feminist organizations across the country supported the Alcaino family, staging marches and demonstrations in favor of Gabriela's law. In late August 2019, a year and 3 months after the tragic murders, amendments to the femicide law were presented at the highest legislative level. Gabriela's law included 15 amendments, eventually approved by Congress. Now, in the Republic of Chile, femicide includes any violence, injury, or murder of a woman due to gender-based hatred, regardless of the relationship between victim and perpetrator. Furthermore, if the victim is a minor or has health issues, these are considered aggravating circumstances. Trial and fair sentence. The trial of Fabian Cesarez took place in April 2022, 4 years after he attacked his ex-girlfriend and her mother. Following the adoption of Gabriela's law, the defense was powerless. Fabian was charged with femicide under aggravating circumstances due to one victim being a minor, as well as double homicide and assault. On April 20th, Fabian was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. After the verdict, Federico and Rodrigo addressed the court, thanking the judges for their fair decision. They acknowledged that no sentence could bring back their daughter and niece, but that a life sentence for the perpetrator would protect other women from the same fate as Carolina and Gabriela. Shafilea Ahmed was born on July 14, 1986, a British Pakistani girl. Shafilea's father, Iftikhar Ahmed, originally hailed from the Gujarat district of Pakistan. At the age of about 20 to 22, Iftikhar moved to Britain for employment. While staying there for a while and during work, Iftikhar falls in love with a foreign girl and marries her. Soon he becomes a father, but when he returns to Pakistan and informs his family about his marriage, they do not accept it. Then Iftikhar's family puts heavy pressure on him to marry another Pakistani girl. Despite Iftikhar's resistance, he eventually succumbs to his family's insistence and he marries a Pakistani girl named Farzana. After the marriage, Iftikhar returns to Britain and, after revealing the truth to his first wife, divorces her. Then, after some time, Iftikhar calls his second wife, Farzana, to Britain from Pakistan. After coming to Britain, Iftikhar starts living with his wife in the city of Bradford in West Yorkshire. It is here that on July 14, 1986, Shafilea Ahmed is born. Shortly after Shafilea's birth, the family moves to the town of Warrington in Britain. It is here that Shafilea completes her early education. During this time, 2 more daughters are born in the family, and Iftikhar's family grows larger. Although this family resides in Britain, on holidays, Iftikhar used to take his wife and all his children to Pakistan for vacation. Now the year had come, 2003, and by now Shafilea Ahmed had also turned 17 and was studying the law. Her dream was to become a lawyer. When Shafilea and the other children have a break on February 18, 2003, Shafilea comes to Pakistan with her family for vacation. During their trip to Pakistan, this family also participates in a family wedding ceremony. However, just a few days after this wedding, a major incident occurs with Shafilea. She accidentally drinks fennel floor cleaner. Actually, fennel is commonly used in Asia for cleaning floors in homes. Now, because fennel is made by mixing some chemicals and soap, drinking it causes severe pain in Shafilea's throat. The reason behind Shafilea drinking fennel is initially said to be because her parents pressured her into arranged marriage with a Pakistani boy. Because of this pressure, Shafilea drank the fennel intending to end her life. But later, her parents claimed that someone had poured fennel into an old bottle of water, kept in the same bottle usually used for drinking water, and in the darkness of the night, Shafilea mistook fennel for water and drank it. Due to this mistake, Shafilea had to endure a lot of pain. As a result, she's admitted to a hospital in Pakistan. Now, because Shafilea's injury was quite severe, she has to stay in the hospital for a long time. During this time, the holidays of other family members also end, so Iftikhar takes his 2 children and wife back to Britain, while Shafilea has to stay in Pakistan for treatment. However, shortly after, Iftikhar arranges for Shafilea's return as well, and on May 27, 2003, Shafilea returns to Britain. Straight from the airport, Shafilea is admitted to a hospital for treatment through an ambulance. After several months of treatment, Shafilea's throat heals considerably, and now she rejoins college. Alongside college, she also starts a part-time job. But on September 18, 2003, a college teacher notices that Shafilea Ahmed hasn't been coming to college for the past week. Attempts are made to contact Shafilea via phone, but she cannot be reached. When teacher asked about this to Shafilea's parents, they revealed that Shafilea has not been home for the past week. Their daughter has been missing for a week, and her parents hadn't filed any complaints about her yet, which strikes Shafilea's teacher as very strange. Immediately after this, they inform the police. Upon filing the case, a police team arrives at Shafilea's house for investigation, and questioning begins with her parents. Shafilea's parents say that they last saw Shafilea at their home on September 11, 2003, and since then, she hasn't been seen. Upon this, the police ask, "When your daughter has been missing for a week, why haven't you filed a complaint with the police yet?" To this, Shafilea's parents respond, "This is not the first time Shafilea has been missing from home for a few days. It has happened several times before." To confirm this, when the police checked the records, it is revealed that Shafilia has been missing from home several times in the past. The first time was when Shafilia was only 12 years old. She went missing with her younger sister on March 10, 1998. Because of this, her parents had also filed a missing report for both their daughters with the police. However, at that time, Shafilia returned home with her sister as evening approached. According to records, Shafilia ran away from home for the second time on November 25, 2002. Once again, her father, Iftikhar Ahmad, filed a missing report for his daughter. After extensive searching, Shafilia was found by the police sitting in a park. According to police records, for the third time, Shafilia left home with a friend on February 3, 2003. This time, Shafilia did not return home for 2 days, and then on February 5, 2003, she went to a safe house for orphaned people and filed a report against her parents for domestic violence and mental abuse. After the report was filed, the police officer spoke with Shafilia Ahmed and her parents, and after everything was cleared up, Shafilia returned home. After this, on February 18, 2003, Shafilia, along with her 2 sisters and parents, goes to Pakistan for a family function and disappears from there shortly after returning to Britain. Now, looking at old records, the police also suspect that Shafilia Ahmed may have gone somewhere again this time and will return home in a few days. Therefore, the police try to find Shafilia in all those places where she could have gone. However, even after a few days, the police cannot find any trace of Shafilia from anywhere. Considering Shafilia's history of running away from home before, the police show a little laziness in the investigation this time. After this, some local media start making an issue out of the police's laziness. As a result, demand for a thorough search for Shafilia increases at the local level. Due to the progress in the Shafilia missing case, the police accelerate their investigation. Subsequently, they discover numerous poems written by Shafia at her home. These poems reveal her dissatisfaction with her household environment. Her parents wished for Shafia to lead a traditional Pakistani girl's life, but she favored Western culture. Through her poetry, she expressed this pain. As Shafilia's poems reach the public, the case gains momentum, putting pressure on the police to find her. Consequently, law enforcement intervenes, intensifying their search efforts in places Shafilia could have visited. Eventually, CCTV footage confirmed Shafilia's identity to her parents, confirming that the girl in the footage is indeed Shafilia Ahmad. A few days after Shafilia went missing, her parents identified her. This made the police believe that at least Shafilia was alive. However, a new turn in the case occurs when the CCTV footage shows Shafilia's class teacher. Actually, when the picture is shown to Shafilia's class teacher, they say that the girl in the photo is not Shafilia Ahmed. Some other people also confirm by watching the CCTV footage that the girl in the footage is not Shafilia. Now, the police find it very strange that Shafilia's parents themselves did not recognize their daughter from the CCTV footage. The police had many questions in their minds, and to find the answers to those questions, they secretly installed some audio recording devices at Shafilia's home. The police were listening to everything that was happening in Shafilia's house through an audio recording device. According to the recording, one day Iftikhar is heard saying, "In Britain, if you kill 40 people and there is no evidence against you, then the law here can't do anything to you." Additionally, one day Iftikhar Ahmad is heard saying, "If the police collect DNA samples from inside the car, what could happen?" Furthermore, the audio recording device captures some suspicious conversations that lead the police to suspect that perhaps Shafilia's father had something to do with his daughter. Now, because the police start to doubt Iftikhar Ahmed, they use his audio recordings as evidence, and on December 18, 2003, the police arrest Iftikhar and his wife Farzana Ahmed, along with 5 other family members, on charges of murdering Shafilia and hiding her body. The police had arrested these people solely on suspicion. The police hoped that during the investigation, some concrete evidence would be found against these peoples. However, no evidence was found against any of the arrested persons, and eventually, the police released them all. It had been a year since 2004, and there was still no evidence in the case of Shafilea Ahmed. The police were engaged in efforts to locate Shafilea. Meanwhile, floods occurred in the famous Kent River, flowing from the Sedgwick area of Britain. When the floods were under control, the body of a girl were found in extremely poor condition on the banks of this river. The distance between the place where the body was found and where Shafilea Ahmed had disappeared was 70 miles. But still, the police have doubts whether this corpse could be Shafilea's. However, to confirm this, DNA samples are collected from the dead body and then matched with the DNA of Iftikhar and Farzana. In this case, a major twist occurs when a body washed away in the flood matches with the DNA samples of Iftikhar. This meant that the body washed away from the river was not someone else's but Shafilea Ahmed's, meaning in the search for Shafilea Ahmed, whom the police had been looking for the past year, now reaches the police itself in the form of a corpse. Now, the biggest question in front of the police was who and why murdered Shafilea Ahmed. However, even before the statements and actions of corpse's parents, there were doubts, and in 2003, these two, along with 5 others, were arrested. Therefore, once again, Shafilea's parents are arrested and questioned. The trial of this case is also going on, but even this time, no allegations can be proven against them, which leads the police to release them again. However, after that, the police detain some other suspects and proceed with the investigation against all of them. But despite many efforts, the police cannot reach the murderer. As time passes, people slowly start to forget about Shafilea Ahmed's case. Shafilea disappeared in 2003, and now it was 2010. That is, it had been 7 years since Shafilea's death. By now, Shafilea's family had also moved on from the incident and had become busy with their daily lives. But then, on August 25, 2010, a major theft occurs at Iftikhar Ahmed's house. By now, Iftikhar Ahmed's family had already become the center of attention in the city due to their daughter's disappearance. Due to this, when theft occurs in this house, it starts making headlines on the front page of newspapers. But once again, this puts heavy pressure on the police. Despite working honestly, the police quickly get involved in the search for the thief. After many days of hard work, the police make a revelation that surprises everyone. Actually, the police arrest not someone else, but Iftikhar Ahmed's daughter, Alicia Ahmed, on charges of theft in the house. In fact, Alicia was Shafilea's younger sister. According to Alicia, she didn't get as much money from home as she demanded and needed. Because of this, she orchestrated the theft of her father's money at her own home. However, the police had solved the theft case very quickly. But the police spot an opportunity here and now. They start talking to Alicia about her sister Shafilea, who disappeared many years ago, and reopen the file related to the Shafilea case. In the initial conversation, the police suspect that Alicia knows something about the disappearance of Shafilea that the world is still unaware of. The police officers try to uncover what happened with Shafilea, but Alicia refuses to cooperate with them. However, the police then tell Alicia, "You have orchestrated a theft in your own house, which could lead to a long prison sentence for you. But if you can provide any information about Shafilea that nobody else knows, your sentence could be significantly reduced." Afterwards, when Alicia reveals some details to the police, everyone is left stunned. Alicia explains, "It was not someone else but my father, Iftikhar, and my mother, Farzana Ahmed, who had beaten Shafilea Ahmad in front of all of us sisters. Then our father put polythene on her face, and due to suffocation, she was dead. Then he placed Shafilea's body in his car and threw it into the distant jungle. However, due to the flood, the body drifted to the riverbank from the jungle." According to Alicia, Iftikhar and Farzana did not like their daughter's modern lifestyle at all. On the surface, Shafilea started falling in love with a boy, and when this matter comes to light, Iftikhar and Farzana quickly try to arrange Shafilea's marriage with their preferred boy. When the family goes to Pakistan for a family function, there is an attempt to forcefully marry Shafilea to a boy there. But Shafilea refuses to marry for this reason, and she consumes fennel. After that, her health deteriorates, and her marriage does not happen either. When Shafilea returns to Britain, her family members here also insist on arranging her marriage with a boy of their choice. But when Shafilea repeatedly refuses this marriage, her father gets angry, and at first beats Shafilea in anger and then covers her face with a polythene bag, and then due to suffocation, Shafia Ahmad dies here. But immediately after this disclosure, Alicia Ahmed becomes a government witness in the case. In exchange, she is assured a minimum sentence in the theft case. However, based on Alicia's statement on September 2, 2010, Farzana and Iftikhar are arrested, and then a case of their own daughter's murder is pursued against them. Both of them remain in jail for several months after the arrest. However, nearly a year later, on September 15, 2011, they are granted bail by the Manchester Crown Court. In the further investigation, the police gather some crucial evidence, and based on that evidence, the trial of this case begins in the Chester Crown Court on May 21, 2012. Initially, Farzana and Iftikhar continue to deny their involvement in their daughter's murder, but when Farzana begins to suspect that she is being framed for her own daughter's murder, she finally accepts in court on July 9, 2012, that Shafilea Ahmed's murder was not committed by anyone else but by Iftikhar Ahmed himself. In her statement, Farzana also reveals that she tried to stop Iftikhar, but instead, Iftikhar beat and threatened her family, saying, "If any of you ever talk about this to anyone, your fate will be just like Shafilea's." Now, 2 witnesses had testified against Iftikhar Ahmed. Besides, the police who gather evidence also indicate that it was Iftikhar Ahmed who murdered Shafilea, then threw her body far into the jungle. However, a natural disaster struck that area, and with the floodwaters, Shafilea's body drifted and reached the riverbank on its own. After a lengthy trial in August 2012, Farzana and Iftikhar are found guilty of murdering their own daughter and disposing of her body. After the murder, they are then sentenced to 25 years each. It is also proven in court that this was an honor killing. Following this verdict, every year on July 14th, Shafilea Ahmed's birthday, the National Day of Memory for Victims of Honor Killings, is observed in her memory. So with this, the case of Shafilea Ahmed comes to a close. However, perhaps nature also desired that Shafilea Ahmed receive justice and her killers be punished. Therefore, albeit late, Shafilea's parents, her murderers, are also sentenced. If you appreciate our efforts, like and share this video. If you haven't subscribed, do so now. Thank you. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Zoe Hastings. Zoe Hastings was born on November 20, 1996, in Kansas. She was the eldest of 5 children, with 3 younger sisters and a brother. Zoe was always available to assist her parents in caring for her siblings, willing to cancel any plans if her parents needed a helping hand. Her parents were deeply religious, so the family spent a considerable amount of time at church. At some point, they relocated to Dallas, where Zoe enrolled in a high school that emphasized creativity and the arts. She had a passion for drawing and also enjoyed participating in school theatrical performances. In her spare time, Zoe worked at an art studio in Dallas. She also worked as a lifeguard at a local pool during the summer after graduating from high school. Zoe had the opportunity to attend some of the top universities in the country. However, she chose to postpone her education and dedicate some time to her church. In October 2015, when Zoe was 18 years old, she was preparing to go on a mission trip for her church and was eagerly looking forward to the journey. On Sunday, October 11th, she planned to attend the Sunday service where they would discuss some details of their upcoming trip. Zoe took the family minivan, promised her parents she'd be back for dinner, and left her house around 4:40 p.m. The church was only a few miles away, and the parents expected her to return around 6:30. However, as time passed, Zoe didn't come back for dinner, which was quite unusual. They sent her several messages, but there was no response. They also tried calling her again with no luck. After some time, they started calling her friends and family members, thinking Zoe might have visited someone after the service, but none of them had seen her that evening. Finally, her parents decided to call the church, and they encountered an unexpected turn of events. Zoe never showed up there. The parents became even more worried and decided to contact the police. Such behavior was highly unusual for their daughter, as she always told them where she was going and never disappeared without any explanation. They called 911, but the officers did not come to their house to take a missing person report, so the parents drove to the police station themselves, filed a report, and began searching for their daughter. They retraced the entire route from home to the church several times, but couldn't find any trace of Zoe. This went on almost all night, and as morning approached, her mother suddenly had an idea. She recalled that her daughter had an iPhone tracking app, which gave them access to her location. They discovered that her phone was just a few hundred yards from the church, near a small creek across the road from it. The parents immediately went to that spot, and to their horror, they saw a lot of police cars, as well as an ambulance and emergency services approaching. One of the officers explained to them that there had been a car accident a few hours ago. The police received a call from a person who was walking their dog, and at one point, a man approached them, saying that there had been a car accident near the creek, and a woman was injured. They both ran to the scene, where the witness found this woman in a pool of blood and called 911. Police officers quickly identified the deceased. It was Zoe Hastings. However, they immediately realized that she didn't die as a result of the accident. It was obvious from the first look that she had been a victim of murder. Zoe lay on the ground a few hundred yards from the minivan, which was partially submerged in the creek. There was a lot of blood near her body, and police officers noticed multiple cuts on her neck. Zoe's dress was pulled up, and her underwear was rolled down, leading detectives to assume that the killer likely assaulted her. Zoe's parents tried to approach their daughter, but the officers stopped them, saying they shouldn't witness such a gruesome scene. While investigating the crime scene, officers found several clues. All the minivan doors except the driver's were locked, which could indicate that the perpetrator either drove the vehicle themselves or approached Zoe directly at the scene. A few yards from the creek, near an embankment under the bridge, police found a blood-covered knife, which was likely used as the murder weapon. Zoe's smartphone data assisted the investigators in establishing the timeline of case. The GPS data showed that she arrived at the creek at 5:01 p.m., only 20 minutes after leaving her home, and she was apparently killed within a few minutes of arriving there. The police also discovered that after leaving home, Zoe made one stop. She went to a DVD rental service near her local Walgreens to return a movie. While experts examined the victim's body and all the available evidence, detectives decided to look for potential witnesses who were at the store or nearby at the same time as Zoe. After speaking with dozens of people, they managed to find two potential witnesses. The first witness was Lester Clark, who worked at a tattoo parlor next to the store on that day. Around 4:45 p.m., he went to buy cigarettes and saw a woman near the DVD rental service. Shortly after, Lester saw her returning to the parking lot and approaching a white minivan. She tried to open the door, but at that moment, a man approached her, stopped the door with his hand, and said something to her. After that, the woman got into the car and moved to the passenger seat, and the man got into the driver's seat, and they drove away. Lester said that the woman did indeed resemble Zoe, although he didn't think much of the incident as nothing obviously bad seemed to happen. The second witness was a homeless man named Gary Whitman, who shared a similar story. Around 4:45 p.m., when he was across the street from the parking lot, he saw a woman heading towards the white minivan. Suddenly, a man approached her from behind and prevented her from getting into the car. He then took something out of his pocket and showed it to the woman. After that, she got into the car, moved to the passenger seat, and the man got into the driver's seat and drove away. Gary provided a similar description of the suspect and added that the situation struck him as highly suspicious. He went into the store and asked the clerk to call 911, but it's unclear if the clerk complied with his request, as police found no records of this call. While investigators interviewed witnesses, experts made several discoveries. The forensic pathologist examined the victim's body and found traces of male semen, but the amount was so small that conducting a full DNA analysis was simply impossible. This only confirmed that the perpetrator had sexually assaulted the victim before the murder. Investigators also examined the victim's car and couldn't find any foreign fingerprints on either the doors or the steering wheel. Based on witness statements, the suspect could have driven Zoe away from the store parking lot in her minivan, which caught the detectives off guard. However, they didn't rule out the possibility that the killer may have simply wiped down the steering wheel and door handle after the murder. Several hairs were also found on Zoe's body, but experts couldn't extract a full DNA sample from them as they were too small. However, when they examined the knife found near the crime scene, they finally had a breakthrough. A DNA sample was discovered on it, which was immediately uploaded to the FBI database, and police got a match. The sample belonged to 34-year-old Antonio Cochran, a man with a lengthy criminal history dating back to his teenage years. He had been arrested for thefts, assaults, home invasions, and was also suspected of numerous other crimes. The year before these events, in 2014, a 17-year-old daughter of his girlfriend accused Antonio of sexual assault. According to her, he offered her a ride, but when she was in the car, Antonio took her to a wooded area, threatening to kill her if she tried to escape. There, he assaulted her, and the man was arrested. He claimed they had consensual sex, and the case went to court. However, during the trial, the prosecution couldn't provide enough evidence to prove his guilt, so Antonio was found not guilty. With his DNA found on the knife, police identified Antonio as the prime suspect, and he was arrested. During the interrogation, he repeatedly denied any involvement in the murder, so the detectives focused their efforts on finding more evidence. The experts took a DNA sample from Antonio and tried to compare it with the semen and semen found on the victim's body. But since both pieces of evidence were too small to extract a full sample, experts decided to try a different type of analysis. They were able to generate an approximate profile and determine if it definitely did not match the chosen DNA. In other words, this method operates on the principle of exclusion, but it does not yield any precise results and cannot be used as a proof of guilt. They compared these partial profiles from the hair and semen with the suspect's DNA and concluded that their similarity couldn't be excluded. Meanwhile, detectives examined Antonio's smartphone and found several interesting text messages. Putting them together, it became clear that on the day of the murder, he was in a very troubled state of mind. At 1:48 a.m., the day before Zoe's death, he texted a friend he lived with, saying he was moving out and he would never see him again. On the next day, at 2:07 p.m., he texted his ex-girlfriend, telling her that his stepmother died, and he mentioned she died right in front of him, and he was finding it difficult to cope with the loss. Over the next hour, Antonio texted another woman twice, stating he had been drinking all night, driving around the city, and crying. These were his final messages before Zoe's death. Later that evening, at 9:30 p.m., he texted his friend again, expressing confusion about what to do with his life and how things had recently taken a turn for the worse. The next day, he sent another message to his ex-girlfriend, saying his life is over and she would soon find out why. Examining his browser search history, detectives found that Antonio had visited local news websites over 30 times before his arrest, specifically checking the crime sections. 5 of those visits were directly related to articles about Zoe's murder. They also noticed that before her death, he rarely visited news sites. Police only found one page in his browsing history related to gang activity. Antonio's smartphone provided the detectives with another lead. Experts obtained GPS data from a cell phone provider and discovered that at 4:34 p.m., his phone connected to a tower covering the area where the store was located. This coincided with the time Zoe was there, but this data wasn't considered strong evidence. It only indicated that his phone was within a few miles of the tower. Nevertheless, it suggested that Antonio arrived in the area just minutes before Zoe left the parking lot. His home was quite far, and throughout the day, his phone had been connected to a different nearby tower. Detectives also learned that Antonio had started a new job at a grocery store just 3 days before the incident. On Monday, the day after the murder, he didn't show up for his shift without giving any explanation. Despite the extensive list of circumstantial evidence against Antonio, the only strong evidence remained the suspect's DNA on the handle of the knife. However, this could have posed a problem, as such evidence alone is often insufficient for a conviction, because merely holding a knife doesn't prove the act of murder. For instance, he could have used the knife under different circumstances, and someone else might have used it to commit the crime. But detectives couldn't find any other evidence, so they decided to proceed with the case and take it to court. The prosecution presented its version of what happened on that day. When Zoe returned to the parking lot to her car, Antonio approached her, pulled out a knife from his pocket, and threatened her to get in the car. He then took the driver's seat himself and drove away. Based on the messages sent by the suspect before the murder, he was in a distressed emotional state due to the death of a relative and had consumed a significant amount of alcohol. According to the investigator's version, he decided to abduct the victim with the intention of assaulting her. He chose Zoe randomly because she happened to be in the parking lot at that moment, and Antonio simply saw an opportunity to commit the crime. Antonio drove to a nearby creek located in a low-lying, tree-surrounded area, making it difficult to see from any direction. There, he forced the victim out of the car, assaulted her, and inflicted 6 stab wounds to her neck. He then got back into the car and attempted to drive it into the creek, possibly to conceal any remaining evidence in the vehicle. However, the car only partially submerged in the water, so Antonio could have wiped the steering wheel and door handle clean of his fingerprints and fled the scene. According to the testimony of the first witness, he saw a man who looked similar returning to the store's parking lot on foot that evening. The defense argued that the majority of the evidence could hardly be considered even circumstantial. For instance, the partial analysis of hair and semen only indicated that Antonio couldn't be excluded as the source of these samples, but didn't conclusively prove his involvement. Regarding the DNA on the knife, the defense seized upon the fact that this evidence alone didn't establish the fact of the murder. According to their version, Antonio could have come into contact with the knife under different circumstances before working at the store, where he had a job at a movie theater and sometimes had to collect various items left behind by visitors, including knives. However, no evidence was found to support this version, and if someone else had taken the knife from the theater and used it to commit the murder, they would have had to somehow avoid erasing Antonio's DNA from the handle, which would have been quite a challenging task. The defense tried to challenge the credibility of the second witness, Gary, who was a homeless man. They found out that he had an arrest warrant for breaking the conditions of his parole. The defense wanted to remove his testimony from the case, but the prosecution disagreed. They said that Gary coming forward willingly despite the arrest warrant showed his desire to help. Gary himself said he just wanted to do the right thing, even though he knew he would be arrested for it. Antonio's lawyers also tried to convince the jury that at the time of Zoe's murder, their client was elsewhere, helping a friend, but no substantial evidence supporting this version was presented. Initially, the prosecution sought the death penalty for Antonio, but during the trial, it became clear that with the available evidence, this would be highly problematic. Therefore, they abandoned these plans. After prolonged deliberation, the jurors eventually found Antonio guilty of murder, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Zoe's parents thanked the investigators and all the participants in the trial for achieving justice for their daughter. Her father also shared that from a young age, he had warned all his children about the dangers the world might pose to them, and he had exerted all his efforts to protect them. But his eldest daughter was abducted just a few hundred yards from their home, and he couldn't do anything to prevent it. December proved to be the most challenging month of the year for Kia and her family. Despite their efforts to infuse the holiday spirit into their home with decorations, gingerbread baking, and caroling, Kia couldn't shake off the sadness in her eyes. She held on to hope, awaiting Santa's arrival, yet deep down, she knew the greatest gift would never return. On what should have been Nadine's 32nd birthday, Phoebe, her sister, honored her memory with a heartfelt video tribute, concluding with Kia singing a song dedicated to their beloved mother. For Claire, life without Nadine was an endless cycle of torment, haunted by nightmares and memories. Daniel's name was taboo in their household, and David shared in their despair. Despite Christmas passing, grief shrouded them, unable to fill the void left by Nadine's absence. On January 14, 2020, Daniel faced court proceedings via video call, his lawyer requesting a psychiatric evaluation, approved by Judge David Kennedy. Daniel confessed to the murder, blaming intoxication from substances consumed that fateful night. The trial, overseen by Judge Michael Magram and a jury of 7 men and 5 women, was marked by prosecutor John O'Kelly's presentation of damning evidence, detailing Daniel's cruelty towards Nadine. Throughout the 3-week trial, Nadine's family faced the painful reality in the courtroom, while Kia chose to spend some days at home with her granddaughter. Daniel's lack of remorse, evident in his fake displays of affection towards his mother, disgusted Claire. Testimonies from the intensive care unit nurse painted a grim picture of Nadine's condition, further solidifying Daniel's guilt. Throughout it all, Daniel never offered an apology to Nadine's family, leaving Claire disillusioned by his insincerity. The chilling echoes of mutilated words reverberated mercilessly down the cold, shadowy corridors, each syllable plunging Claire's soul deeper into an abyss of agony. Dr. Linda's relentless discourse stretched over 2 grueling hours, meticulously detailing every gruesome injury inflicted upon Nadine. With each description, the weight of the brutality bore down heavily upon Claire's heart, a relentless assault on her senses. As Dr. Linda's voice pierced through the air, Daniel remained eerily composed, his demeanor untouched by the harrowing accounts laid bare before him. It was as though the suffering of Nadine and her shattered family were mere trifles to him, inconsequential in the face of his own self-absorption. Refusing to acknowledge his guilt, Daniel's defiance only served to amplify Claire's anguish. His steadfast denial, devoid of remorse or empathy, cast him further into the depths of his own depravity. Despite the damning verdict that condemned him to a lifetime behind bars, Daniel's indifference persisted, a stark reminder of the darkness that dwelled within him. But even as the gavel fell and justice was seemingly served, the wounds of Nadine's family festered, raw and unhealed. The leniency of Irish law, offering a mere 18 years for a life extinguished, felt like a cruel mockery, a mockery that Claire and Nadine's loved ones could not accept. In the unforgiving confines of Whitfield Prison, Daniel found himself marked for retribution, a target among predators hungry for vengeance. Isolated from his fellow inmates for his own safety, he remained defiant, his arrogance unyielding even in the face of imminent danger. Yet, fate's relentless hand struck again within the walls of Midlands Prison, where Daniel became the victim of another inmate's brutal assault. Hospitalized and scarred, he bore the physical remnants of his own malevolence, a grotesque reminder of the pain he had inflicted upon Nadine and those who loved her. Nadine's story, a tragic testament to the horrors of domestic violence, reverberated far beyond the shores of Ireland. Born in Arlo, a beacon of hope on the southeastern coast, her light was extinguished far too soon, leaving behind a legacy of sorrow and a family torn asunder by grief. In the summer of 2012, three sisters, Phoebe, Tanith, and Kayla, embarked on a journey of adventure. Among them was Nadine, a captivating 26-year-old woman with plans to explore the wonders of Australia. With a heart brimming with anticipation, Nadine looked forward to a vacation filled with thrilling escapades, sports, and the prospect of forging new friendships. Nadine's essence radiated a unique charm that captivated those around her. Her laughter and radiant smile had a way of enchanting everyone she encountered. Despite her outgoing nature, Nadine harbored a sensitive soul, always seeing the goodness in people. She treasured her family deeply, finding solace and support in their love. Photography became Nadine's passion as she sought to capture fleeting moments of beauty in the world. What began as a hobby soon blossomed into a successful career where Nadine used her talents to enhance the beauty of others. In matters of the heart, Nadine treaded cautiously, cherishing her independence and relishing the company of friends. However, fate intervened when she crossed paths with Daniel, a reserved yet intriguing man from Dublin. Despite their stark differences in demeanor, Nadine found herself drawn to Daniel's piercing gaze and quiet strength. Their connection deepened as they explored the exotic landscapes of Australia together, sharing intimate moments and dreams beneath the sun-kissed skies. Watching Daniel conquer the waves while surfing, Nadine saw admiration and affection reflected in his eyes. Despite the geographical distance and the mysteries surrounding Daniel's life in Dublin, their bond grew stronger with each passing day. Nadine and Daniel's time together in Australia was a symphony of enchantment, promising a love that transcended boundaries. Their connection blossomed swiftly, although Nadine regarded it as a playful flirtation with no strings attached. Phoebe, Nadine's younger sister, was the first to be informed, followed by their mother, Claire, who quickly discerned the casual nature of the relationship. In June of 2013, Nadine returned home bearing unexpected news. She was pregnant with Daniel's child. Despite their attempts to forge a proper family, their relationship floundered, and Nadine found herself navigating the journey of motherhood alone when she gave birth to their daughter, Kia, in November of the same year. Phoebe stood steadfastly by her side, offering support and becoming a guiding presence in those early, challenging days of motherhood. Nadine's pregnancy marked a profound turning point in her life. Despite the dissolution of her relationship with Daniel, she embraced her role as a mother and found new purpose. Phoebe's unwavering support was instrumental during this period of transition. Nadine's story, though tinged with tragedy, is a testament to the power of love and familial bonds. Disappointed by her relationship with Daniel, Nadine longed for a stable and loving environment for her daughter. However, Daniel showed no signs of maturing into a responsible father figure. While Nadine tirelessly worked to provide for Kia, Daniel remained stagnant, refusing to take on the responsibilities of parenthood. In 2016, desperate to create a sense of family for Kia, Nadine made a final attempt by renting a house where they could all live together. However, Daniel's failure to follow through shattered Nadine's hopes for reconciliation. It was a pivotal moment for Nadine, as she came to terms with the reality of Daniel's absence and the broken promises that had plagued their relationship. Despite the pain and disappointment, Nadine emerged stronger, guided by the love for her daughter and the unwavering support of her sister. In the end, Nadine's journey was not defined by the failures of her relationship with Daniel, but by her resilience and determination to create a better life for herself and her daughter. Although Nadine and Daniel had separated, she did not lose hope that Kia would be able to keep in touch with her father. Unlike Nadine, Claire knew that Daniel wouldn't change. His only passion was boxing, and his family and daughter were not important to him. Despite all the difficulties, Nadine stayed strong. She continued to take care of Kia, giving her the love and support that she herself had not received from her father. Even though her daughter grew up without a father, she had an example of a strong and ambitious mother who who taught her to never give up. Claire suggested that Nadine go to Rome to celebrate her birthday. The trip took place in October 2019. Arriving in Rome, going out on the terrace, and enjoying the air filled with the smell of coffee and fresh pastries, Nadine confessed to her mother that she was going through a difficult period in her life. Her relationship with Daniel did not lead to anything good. Nadine did not need him and was good at being a mother. She liked her job, her home, and was proud of her achievements. Soon, Nadine was offered a job as a model. At that moment, she saw her future as promising and happy. Back in Ireland, Nadine was disappointed to learn that Daniel continued to make empty promises to visit Kia. One day, when Daniel was supposed to give Nadine money for their daughter, he asked for a meeting. Nadine immediately suspected that it was just an excuse to meet her and not Kia, but she could not refuse. At the same time, Nadine did not want to ruin Daniel's image in Kia's eyes. She still had hope to create a real family, although it seemed more and more impossible every day. Coming up with new excuses for the absence of her father, Nadine tried to protect her baby from disappointment and pain. She didn't want her daughter to suffer from Daniel's irresponsibility and ignorance. Despite this, Daniel did not want to break up with Nadine and let her go. He was afraid that she might start dating other men. Because of this, Nadine was forced to hide her personal life from him in order to avoid his constant control and threats. By the end of 2019, Nadine's life began to change. She left behind her relationship with Daniel. Despite this, Nadine looked forward to the future with hope and started dating a guy from Turkey. However, her attempts to keep this relationship a secret from Daniel were in vain. He found out about her new partner and was angry and furious. Unable to come to terms with the loss of control over Nadine, Daniel began to stalk her, turning her life into a nightmare. On December 5th, tired of the constant threats and insults, Nadine texted Daniel. She made it clear to him that their relationship was over and demanded that the harassment stop. Nadine firmly believed that this would put an end to this exhausting and tiring relationship. On December 13th, Nadine asked Daniel to babysit Kia as she was going to celebrate her aunt's birthday at a local pub. They agreed that Daniel would stay with Kia at Nadine's house while she spent time with her family. Daniel and Nadine lived in different cities. Daniel lived in London, and Nadine lived in Wicklow. On the night of December 14th, Daniel called Nadine several times at 11:57 p.m. and at 1:26 a.m., but there was no answer. Eventually, he sent her a message asking her to come back. Soon after Nadine returned home, she quickly changed her clothes, but what happened next remains unclear. However, we know that Daniel attacked Nadine and scared her 6-year-old daughter, Kia. One of the neighbors, Ayla Klenovich, heard the noise and screams, went to the house, and saw the open door to Nadine's apartment with the light on. She decided to check what was going on there. At the doorstep, Camila was met with a harrowing sight. Nadine lay sprawled on the floor of the hallway, with Daniel looming over her, his face twisted in a mixture of rage and panic. Overwhelmed with horror, Camila rushed back to her apartment, her trembling hands immediately dialing Nadine's family to relay the dreadful truth. As Claire listened to the tale, her demeanor turned icy, a whirlwind of unsettling thoughts racing through her mind, a foreboding sense settling in. Meanwhile, Daniel, consumed by his fury, fled the scene in his Volvo, leaving behind a haze of dust and the lingering stench of blood. Upon bursting into Nadine's apartment, a grisly scene unfolded before Claire's eyes. The walls of the hallway splattered with blood like strokes of an artist's brush, shattered glass and mirrors reflecting the gruesome reality of what transpired. Yet, this was only the beginning. At 9:50 a.m., Claire, Phoebe, and Kyle entered the kitchen, only to be met with a gut-wrenching sight. Nadine's lifeless body lay before them, torn and devoid of life. Simultaneously, some 20 miles away in the town of La, Daniel's recklessness met its end as his car careened into a ditch. Emerging from the wreckage, Daniel appeared dazed, his eyes vacant, his trembling form coated in blood. Confessing to a bewildered witness, he spoke in a voice laden with despair, admitting to the heinous act. his words echoing like a plea for absolution. As Daniel was whisked away to the hospital in an ambulance, his murmurs of love for Nadine hung in the air, as if he sought forgiveness in his darkest hour. Meanwhile, chaos reigned in Nadine's apartment. Stepping through the threshold, paramedics and police officers were met with the thick scent of blood. The scene before them, a testament to the brutality that unfolded within. Among them, paramedic Ian Clark was struck by the extent of the devastation. Broken dishes, shattered glass, and bloody footprints painted a grim portrait of a violent crime. Phoebe and Kyle, filled with grief and confusion, she lay unconscious, her body unrecognizable. An ambulance rushed Nadine to St. Vincent's Hospital, where she was admitted to the intensive care unit at 10:58 a.m. Doctors noted severe injuries to Nadine's head, neck, and chest, expressing concern over her condition, especially upon discovering 64 additional injuries of unknown origin on her body. Despite multiple blood transfusions, Nadine's critical condition remained stable. Claire, refusing to lose hope, stood vigilantly by Nadine's side, holding on to the belief that her daughter would return home. She surrounded Nadine with familiar belongings, including photographs, perfumes, and toys, hoping to provide comfort and support during this ordeal. Though unsure of what lay ahead, Claire was determined to weather the storm alongside her daughter, convinced that love and care would see them through. On December 16th, as Nadine fought for her life, Daniel faced a court appearance, ultimately being remanded into custody pending further trial. Later that afternoon, Claire accompanied Nadine for a follow-up examination of her cerebral cortex, praying for her daughter's strength to persevere. Tragically, on December 17th, between 3 and 4 p.m., Nadine drew her final breath, never regaining consciousness. Her most severe injuries proved fatal. The Irish police colonel, Dean McCarthy, deemed this violent crime one of the most heinous he had encountered. Dr. Linda Mogan, the chief state pathologist, conducted Nadine's autopsy at the city funeral home on December 18th. Left alone with her thoughts, Claire grappled with unanswered questions, struggling to comprehend the reasons behind the tragedy. The following day, Daniel recounted the harrowing details of the event. In the narrative of the assault, he recounted how he struck her and utilized the charger cord to strangle her. Initially, he targeted Nadine, delivering blows to her head despite her attempts to resist. Daniel persisted, employing various violent methods, including stabbing and strangling Nadine with the cord. Throughout the ordeal, Kia, Nadine's daughter, cried out, pleading with her father to cease the violence and spare her mother's life, but her pleas went unanswered. Despite Nadine's desperate struggles, Daniel's strength prevailed, and he continued the assault until morning. A funeral service was held on December 22nd at St. Mary and Peter's Church in Arlo, Nadine's hometown. Over 1,000 mourners gathered to bid farewell to her, with the church overflowing and hundreds more watching via live broadcast. 6 individuals solemnly carried Nadine's casket, adorned with scarlet velvet roses, resembling Snow White, peacefully at rest. In the front row, Nadine's mother, Claire, struggled to contain her tears, her eyes filled with love and admiration for her daughter. Surrounding her were grieving relatives and friends, openly expressing their sorrow. David, Nadine's father, approached the altar, his voice trembling with emotion and tears streaming down his face as he placed one of Nadine's handbags beside her casket, a poignant reminder of her elegance and charm. A family friend, Kyle, held a trembling photo of Nadine and Kia, radiating happiness and affection. Meanwhile, Kia, still grappling with confusion and grief, clung to her mother's coffin, unaware of the full extent of the tragedy. Phoebe, Nadine's sister, fought back tears as she brought her pair of shoes to the altar, the same ones Nadine had planned to wear to the prom. Tanith, another close friend, approached with delicate care, placing a photo album brimming with cherished memories on the polished wooden table. Each page held snapshots, capturing the essence of Nadine's vibrant spirit and radiant smile, images destined to eternally reside within the depths of their hearts. Priest Michael Moore, a beacon of sincere empathy, took his place at the altar, his countenance a reflection of the collective sorrow filling the chapel. With gentle yet firm words, he commenced the ceremony, his voice weaving a tapestry of eternal life and hopeful promises. To the grieving assembly, his words were like a soothing melody, offering solace to wounded hearts. In a moment of profound tenderness, Priest Michael turned his attention to little Kia, a beacon of innocence amidst the sea of mourning. With a paternal warmth, he expressed gratitude for the joy she had brought Nadine, and tenderly voiced hope for her future, promising an abundance of care and love. He pledged that they, the gathered mourners, would stand as Kia's guardian angels, a shield against life's harshness. Phoebe and Tanith, their voices choked with emotion, stepped forward to speak the final words, their love and grief intertwining in a poignant tribute to their beloved sister. Tears flowed freely as they bid their farewells, their hearts heavy with the weight of loss. As the strains of funeral music filled the air, marking the close of the ceremony, Nadine's coffin was gently lowered into the earth, finding its final resting place in the hallowed grounds of San Gabriel Cemetery. Loved ones gathered to bid their last goodbyes, their whispered prayers, a solemn tribute to a life lost too soon. In memory of Nadine's spirit and to provide support for Kia, who now faced a future without parental guidance, the Nadine Lot Charity Fund was established. A testament to the enduring legacy of love and compassion, it would serve as a beacon of hope for those in need, ensuring that Nadine's light would continue to shine brightly in the lives of others.